Michael cast a 2-star spell called Dark Vision, allowing him to see even in the blackest of darkness. But even if he didn't, he could clearly see the creature lurking in the distance. It was creeping towards him, trying to initiate a surprise attack. It was unfortunate for the monster that Michael could see its mana particles as clear as day. Before Michael could even do anything, the creature suddenly shot out a ball of violet acid towards his body. But as soon as it made contact with his absolute unity defense, it dissipated into nothingness. Seeing its attack rendered useless, the creature finally jumped out of the darkness and threatened to smother Michael with its body. But just like before, the invisible protective bubble around Michael deflected the creature away, forcing it to crash into the wall. After a moment, the creature regained its shape and continued its assault on Michael. It didn't stop even though its attacks couldn't penetrate through his defenses. This gave Michael enough time to observe the creature's true appearance. It looked just like the sketch, with its 2 blob hands and a lower body like a snail's feet. Its body was made entirely out of a strange violet liquid that seemed to ooze dangerous fumes at all times. Chat JK2, can you analyze what kind of creature I'm facing? According to the bestiary in the Magic Library, this creature is most likely a mutated poison slime. Mutated poison slime. Species, slime. Difficulty, element, poison. A difficulty of a 3-star means that only a 3-star mage can take care of them. Good thing I'm a 4-star mage, Michael thought to himself, since his superior golden nose told him that the slime had a good potential for awakening. Michael didn't want to have a hostile relationship with the creature. It would be ideal if he could talk to the slime. So, he approached the creature with his hands raised, showing that he had no intention of hurting the creature. I just want to talk, Michael said out loud. Even though he knew that the creature couldn't understand his words, he held on to the hope that the slime was smart enough to know his intentions just from the tone of his voice. Gurgle, gurgle. Would you like me to translate? Chat JK2 suggested. You can do that? A slime's physical body and consciousness are made entirely out of mana. This means that with the supreme skill, mana gathering, it is possible to discern what the slime is thinking from the vibrations in the poison mana in its body. This is what Michael wanted. If the creature was smart enough to have its own consciousness, then it could be reasoned with. Translate its words, please. As the slime mumbled unintelligible noises, Michael suddenly heard another voice dubbed over the slime's voice. Humans kill. Me no want to get hurt again, the slime said. Michael felt pity for the creature. It didn't seem like a dangerous monster at all, unlike what they reported about the slime. Chat JK2. Can you translate my words into something the slime can understand? Understood. I will vibrate the poison mana in your body. Michael felt the poison mana in his cores move up to his throat, right next to his voice box. And as his throat moved to talk, the poison mana shot out of his mouth like a visible sound wave. I mean you no harm, Michael said to the slime. Upon understanding his voice, the creature jumped away in shock. Sorcery. Humans strange, dangerous. The slime couldn't understand how the human was speaking its language, and this fear led it to act irrationally. It attacked Michael with a lot more intensity despite his pleas for peace. The slime submerged itself into the water in the tunnel, absorbing all the contaminated river water in its body. Then, its mouth formed a cannon-like shape with a long barrel aimed straight at Michael. The water shot forth from the slime, threatening to drench him in dirty water full of viruses and bacteria. But as usual, the large stream of water splashed away from Michael as it made contact with his defensive bubble. Human, strong, it uttered in complete fear. I don't want to hurt you, Michael said as he slowly walked towards the slime. But he didn't notice that this seemed to have had the opposite effect. From the slime's perspective, Michael was walking towards itself with such casualness that he ignored the slime's greatest attacks as if it were nothing. Even some humans and mages had to dodge away from this water blast. But not Michael. No, stay away. Me no want to die, the slime screamed as Michael cornered it in the depths of the cavern. When the slime thought death was coming, it didn't hesitate to pull out its most lethal attack. Its slimy body started to glow a violet hue, using up all the precious poison mana in its body for this final strike. Slowly, thin needles made entirely out of poison mana appeared in the air, numbering only in the high one-digit number. But as the slime used up all the poison mana in its body, more and more needles appeared in the air, almost covering the entire cavern with poison needles. The slime's body, which had been as big as a washing machine, was now as small as a basketball after sacrificing the poison mana in its body. Human, no move, or me kill. Despite the slime's warning, Michael still took a step forward. As soon as his feet landed on the ground, the slime ordered the thousands of poison needles to converge on Michael's body. This would have turned a human's body into skewers and poisoned them at the same time. But Michael was no normal human. He raised his hand, motioning for the needles to stop. And horrifyingly enough, the needles stopped just a few inches away from Michael's protective bubble. The needles started to shake as the slime felt its control over the poison needles slip off from its grasp. It was taken away. Michael spun his finger, and the poison needles followed his order, turning around to face the slime instead. This was the true power of his supreme skill, mana gathering. It allowed him to take control of all mana, whether it was his or not. With the thousands of poison needles pointed at its face, the slime closed its eyes, accepting its eventual death. It was born in the midst of the River Dames, formed from the amalgamation of all the waste and filth swimming around in the water. It spent its days observing humans, seeing the happy smiles on their faces as they played around near the water. But even if the slime wanted to experience the joys of being human, it knew that it couldn't join them because it was different. It was a monster. It was content just watching humans under the River Dames. It even ate and consumed filth, scrap, and waste in the river so that the water would be safe for the humans. That was how much the slime loved humans. But what did it get in return? It was treated as nothing but a deadly monster. It was hunted down, battered, and bruised. Even then, the slime didn't hate the humans. That was just the way of the world. It was a monster, and they were human. Its slimy body shivered, accepting that it was nearing the end of its life. It could only hope that in its next life, it would be born as a human instead. The slime waited, but the pain didn't come. It slowly opened its eyes and saw Michael looking at it with a warm gaze. With a snap of his fingers, Michael dissipated the poison needles into poison mana and returned them into its rightful place. The slime felt power restored in its body, slowly enlarging it into its original size. "You must have had it rough, huh, buddy?" Michael said as he kneeled in front of the slime. He raised his hand and patted the slime on its head. The creature flinched, thinking that Michael would hurt it like the other humans hurt it. But upon feeling the warmness of Michael's hand, the slime couldn't help but snuggle towards his touch. Michael chuckled. It felt like he was petting a very wet but loyal dog. And as he continued to make physical contact with the creature, images suddenly flashed through his mind. It showed the slime's memories of swimming through the endless waste of the River Dames. Michael felt loneliness and longing for companionship as he looked through its memories. He saw the slime watching the humans from afar, protecting them from the harmful bacteria and viruses in the polluted river. But the humans treated it with fear and panic. They hunted the slime, chasing it to the ends of the river. It could have fought back against its oppressors, but chose to flee instead. Only when it was cornered with no way to escape did it finally attack. Upon finding out the slime's story, Michael finally realized something. "I see. This is the reason why the goddess said that there would be a plague in this city. The slime had been cleansing the river from disease this whole time. And if they succeeded in hunting down the slime, then bacteria would run rampant in the water, leading to a plague. Supreme skill, gift bestowal activated. Mutated poison slime. Potential talent, SSS class malevolent passenger. Potential skill, rogue takeover. The user will be able to inhabit the body of a creature or object as its shadow. Subdivision, the user can create clones of itself. You have discovered the slime's hidden talent. Would you like to awaken it?" Michael wanted to fulfill the slime's dream. He wanted to give it a second life. Chat JK2. Please awaken the slime's talent. Understood. Would you like to name the creature? Michael always wanted a dog, and he would have wanted to name the dog as Fudge. The slime's new name is Fudge. A golden light emerged from his hand. A mystical power different from elemental mana flowed from the tip of his fingers and onto the slime, endowing it with a warm sensation. The creature didn't reject Michael's hand. It knew instinctively that this was something good. The slime's violet body started to glow, increasing in intensity until the whole cavern was lit up in a bright white light. Awakening complete. After a few seconds, the light faded. Michael opened his eyes and saw a very strange sight. The slime's physique was still the same as it was before, with its slimy violet body and two blob-like arms. But strangely enough, it seemed to be wearing completely dark clothes with a hooded cloak, black gloves, and even though it had no mouth, there was a bandana covering the lower half of its head. What the? The slime was wearing something that only video game characters were wearing. Michael immediately inspected the slime's new system. Fudge. Magic. S-Class. Element Mastery. Unity Element. Magic Purity. 93%. Mana Quantity. Not applicable. Species. Sapient Rogue Slime. Talent. SSS Class Malevolent Passenger. Realm. 1-star Rogue. Skills. Rogue Takeover. Subdivision. Lesser Unity Gathering. Lesser Unity Defense. Chat JK2. I have some questions. What happened to the slime? I thought it was a poison slime. Also, why is it wearing this strange outfit? In the process of its talent awakening, Fudge has evolved into the next stage of its evolution line. Due to the intervention of the Supreme Skill, the slime has deviated from its original evolution line and has changed into something completely unique. Just then, Fudge suddenly awoke from his slumber and jumped up into Michael's arms. The slime, with its complete rogue attire, looked up at Michael with gratitude in its eyes. Master, thank you for gifting me this new life, Fudge said in a fluent human language. You can speak? The slime nodded, with its hood bobbing up and down. Yes, Master. Upon my evolution, I was given a lot of new knowledge that completely changed my perspective in life. What is Fudge talking about? Michael asked ChatJK2, suspicious of his AI assistant's antics. I have downloaded useful information directly into Fudge's mind to facilitate its new talent. Before Michael could ask ChatJK2 to elaborate, Fudge suddenly jumped out of his arms and landed on the ground with a superhero landing. My job in this life is to spread the majesty of your strength. Soon, the whole world will know the name Michael Vanderbilt. I will become your shadow, your loyal servant. I will be atomic. Michael was speechless. Fudge's speech was taken straight out of a famous character in his previous life. ChatJK2, you gave Fudge information from an anime? It's been a few days after Michael first met Fudge and awakened the little creature into an intelligent little pet. He let Fudge accompany him everywhere he went, sticking to his shadow at all times and observing the human world just like it wanted. Young master, Fudge whispered from his shadow, I have successfully spread my clones around the city. I have become its shadow, its silent observer. There are already a couple of promising candidates that I will soon contact to hopefully join me in my mission. Our main job is to spread our forces to the entire world, influencing them into becoming loyal servants of the great Michael Vanderbilt. Michael shook his head in exasperation. He still couldn't believe that ChatJK2 taught the little bugger nothing but anime tropes and plot ideas. Instead of giving it something useful like Castell's Business Management College course, ChatJK2 gave the slime an excuse to act like an edgy teenager. Because of that, Fudge used its shape-shifting ability as a slime to create the perfect costume that embodied the shadow ninja, as Fudge liked to call it. Fudge, it sounds like you're trying to start a cult, Michael replied to his shadow. Cult, Fudge whispered to itself. I like the sound of that. Michael ignored that. Now, would you please let me work on the sewer project? Michael said as he put his focus back on the papers in his hands. After a few weeks of preparation, they were finally ready to start the construction of the sewer system. Castell organized everything from employment to scheduling and even to material procurement. This made things move extremely smoothly. And despite Fudge's weird quirks, the little slime was actually very useful in finding talented individuals who could help in the construction. As it turned out, its clones were actually connected to Michael in some way, allowing him to remotely assess the talent of a lot of people. It was unfortunate that he didn't find talent as great as Castell or Fudge, but he still discovered a lot of people who didn't know they had talent in construction or manufacturing. Michael told Castell about those people, and she quickly hired them into the company. Once she met the edgy little Fudge, she was quickly smitten with its cuteness and usefulness. Fudge became the reason why Reborn was able to recruit a lot of talented individuals. Meanwhile, his parents were also hard at work for the sewer system. They were able to procure a proper city permit courtesy of Michael's father, who used the Vanderbilt name to quickly get things rolling. As expected, the higher-ups immediately signed the papers and gave funding for the project. Michael's mother also did some heavy work during the past few days. She quickly spread around her circles that Reborn was having a public showing of their innovative new inventions that could provide running water inside homes without the use of magic. As expected of gossip, it quickly spread like wildfire. When the day of the presentation came, thousands of people gathered in front of the Reborn office. For this showing, Michael created a very simple recreation of the plumbing system using glass pipes, allowing the people to see that there wasn't any sort of magic going on. As soon as they saw water flowing like a wild stream, the spectators gasped like they had seen a ghost. "Oh my God, the water is moving. It's a waterfall. How is that possible?" To assure them that there was no funny business going on, the Magic Tower itself supervised the presentation and assured the general public that there wasn't any magic in the contraption. Since Reborn and the Magic Tower had a good reputation within the community, a lot of people trusted their words. Castell also made sure to have a couple of employees publicly try out the faucets and showers while using Reborn soap and shampoo. This immediately enticed the women into wanting the plumbing system for their homes. But perhaps the most popular product was the revolutionary toilet. "Wow, amazing!" They clapped as all the waste got flushed down the toilet. "It's so convenient. With this, we don't have to dirty our hands." Incredible. Just one presentation of the toilet immediately made people buy into the whole package. They wanted faucets in their kitchen, they wanted showers in their bathroom, and most of all, they wanted toilets in their homes. And you're saying that we only need to buy the package, and Reborn will take care of all the construction? Talk about a steal. I want it. I'll buy it. But as soon as Castell announced that the construction was a first-come, first-served deal, people immediately clamored to be the first ones to buy the package. "Me first. I got here first. I'll pay double to have it constructed in my house tomorrow. I'll pay triple." As the people continued to create a ruckus around the streets, one particular visitor looked at the chaos with a strange expression. The woman wore an exotic robe, which seemed to have been made with a very expensive silk material. She rode on a very large carriage inlaid with what seemed to be colorful scales from Monster. Leading this carriage were multiple bodyguards who wore a similar type of robe, made specifically for combat. It was clear that this visitor was a very important and a very wealthy individual. "What is that?" she asked her bodyguards. "That seemed to be some kind of presentation, but strange, I don't sense any kind of magic in that water." "How is it flowing?" her advisor exclaimed in disbelief. This immediately caused an expression of interest in the woman. She ordered the carriage to stop and observe how the presentation unfolded. As she saw the faucets, showers, and specifically the toilet, she couldn't help but exclaim her desire to get one for herself. Whoever created those inventions was an extremely talented individual, one whose ingenuity seemed out of this world. "I want it. Buy it for me," she said to her advisor, who quickly moved to do as she said. Even though her home was almost halfway around the world, which meant that the transportation of the plumbing system would take hundreds of thousands of gold, she didn't care. She had more than enough money. She was a royal from the Draconic Kingdom, after all. Michael arrived at Castell's office to talk about the current state of the project. "I'm sorry, young master. I've been extremely busy as of late. I underestimated how much demand we'd have with the plumbing system," Castell said, with her hair and uniform in complete disarray. Michael felt sorry for her. The papers and contracts strewn around the room told him that this was an extremely stressful time for his CEO. "But this is good, young master. Our profits have shot off through the roof. Just as you expected, the profits will far surpass the expenses we need to construct the sewer system. The money we'll gain from this will be enough for us to expand to other cities." Michael nodded, satisfied with how fast the Reborn company was growing. "I have also heard that a wealthy individual from overseas has taken an interest in our products. They are requesting to buy all our products in bulk, which would give us a profit of more than 1,000,000 gold coins." Michael was surprised, but didn't think much of it. He would only come to know how important that individual was later on, but that was a story for another time. Meanwhile, Michael heard a knock on the door. The man didn't wait for a response and opened the door, showing himself to be Michael's father, Bart Vanderbilt. "Michael, are you ready? We'll start our journey to your grandfather's estate today." Michael completely forgot that they were supposed to visit his grandfather today. Now that he had undergone his talent awakening, it was finally time to show himself to his grandfather, the man who built the Vanderbilt business from the ground up. His parents stressed over this meeting for the whole week. They made sure to tailor the best suit for him, making him look more mature and respectable, though Michael thought he looked a bit uptight with it. They worried about this meeting because this was what would decide his future as a Vanderbilt. Will he gain the favor of his grandfather and inherit some of his wealth, or will he remain simply a Vanderbilt in name? Although they were confident that Michael was more than talented enough to interest his grandfather, they still couldn't help but be anxious the whole carriage ride there. Michael thought that he didn't have to worry about money because of his Reborn company, but his father reminded him that compared to the entire Vanderbilt business, his profits were merely a drop in front of an ocean. Not only that, earning the favor of his grandfather would allow him connections with a lot of influential people, allowing him to become a powerful figure in the future. But Michael didn't care much about that. The only reason why he wanted to visit his grandfather was because he wanted to put a face into the legendary name of Eyes Vanderbilt. He didn't hear much about his grandfather, but from the small tidbits of stories his father told him, it looked like his grandfather was a man of focus, commitment, and sheer will. He used to be an impoverished orphan who didn't even have a bronze coin in his pocket. But within a century, he built a business that conquered the entire world. So, Michael was very interested in meeting his grandfather. After almost a month of traveling, they finally reached the main Vanderbilt estate, or the more accurate name for it would be the Vanderbilt Kingdom. After all, the place looked even larger than Kingsbridge itself. There were multiple mansions and castles within the walls, creating a miniature world for themselves. Bart explained that most of his relatives lived inside the Vanderbilt Kingdom, managing their territories as if they were royals. Michael had a lot of relatives. A lot. It seemed that his grandfather was quite a ladies' man, having more than 5 wives and even more concubines. Because of that, Michael had about 100 aunts and uncles, all of which had their own children. Bart was the youngest and the last child of the Vanderbilt children. After his birth, Eyes Vanderbilt got too old to bear any more children. So, in terms of inheritance, Michael wasn't really supposed to receive anything. Bart himself only received the businesses in Kingsbridge, which was very small compared to what his older siblings got. The only ones who could be considered for an inheritance will be Michael's oldest cousins, the children of the eldest children of Eyes Vanderbilt. However, Bart and Lilia were hoping that with Michael's talent, he would be given an exception. After all, Michael was a once-in-a-thousand-year genius mage, a talented businessman who created his own thriving business, and most importantly, he received a supreme skill in his talent awakening. There was no one more talented than him. Finally, they reached the gates of the Vanderbilt Kingdom. They were quickly let inside after a brief inspection of their family emblem. Upon informing the guards of their purpose of visit, they quickly escorted them into the main estate, the house where his grandfather lived. Once he caught sight of the mansion, Michael finally caught a glimpse of the immensity of the Vanderbilt wealth. Exotic animals and nearly extinct trees roamed around the area like a jungle, almost becoming a zoo. Michael knew Vanderbilt had too much money because even those animals had their own mansions and their own caretakers. As they traveled further and further inside the kingdom, Michael finally saw the main territory of Grandfather Vanderbilt. The mansion itself was very large, made up of very expensive and exotic materials that Michael had never even seen before. They were even given a map so that they wouldn't get lost within the mansion. Thankfully, Michael and his parents didn't have to wander around the mansion. Their only purpose for this visit was to meet with his grandfather, so they went straight towards his grand chambers. Bart and Lilia held Michael's hands as they slowly walked towards the large double doors. Today was the day when Michael would get his inheritance, and it all depended on this meeting. As they opened the door, they were met with a large chamber fit only for a king. There was a large throne at the very end of the chamber, with high arches and columns that gave the entire chamber a sense of majesty and grandiosity. The paintings and tapestries to the sides depicted multiple portrayals of the world, signifying the Vanderbilt's control over global commerce. Every piece of furniture, whether it be a chair or a table, was ornate with real gold, dragon scales, and even pearls from the deep sea. Bart and Lilia immediately kneeled to show their respects, which Michael copied a second later. They were in front of the board of directors of the entire Vanderbilt business, who sat at the seats beside the throne. They answered only to Eyes Vanderbilt and no one else. "We have come to ask a favor from my father," Bart said, keeping his head low. "My son has recently awakened a supreme talent and has proven himself to be a genius unlike any other." Upon hearing about Michael's supreme talent, the elders sat up straight and looked at the 10-year-old boy with a spark in their eyes. It was rare for them to see such a promising youth. Just the fact that he was extremely talented in magic was enough to make him the most important grandchild in the entire Vanderbilt lineage. But a supreme talent? That was another thing entirely. The board of directors all looked at each other, sending silent signals with just their eyes. They were the people who helped build the Vanderbilt business to the behemoth it was now. They had more than enough insight to know how much of an asset Michael could become in the Vanderbilt family. They would have probably already asked Bart to let Michael live in the Vanderbilt kingdom so that they could nurture the kid using all of their resources. However, when they remembered something, they quickly got disheartened. "Your child's talent is truly one in a million," one old guy said, sitting on the seat directly next to the throne. "We would like nothing more than to increase the inheritance given to your son that will reflect the value we put on his future." Upon hearing this, Bart and Lilia's expression turned into one of joy and anticipation. This was their very goal from the start. "We are glad to hear that. Anything will help in nurturing Michael into his full potential," Bart said respectfully, with a hint of excitement. But as Bart raised his head, he noticed something. "By the way, where's my father?" he asked. There was a clear absence in the throne room. The main seat reserved only for the legendary Vanderbilt was empty. The most important man in the room was missing. The old man sighed. "That is precisely the problem, Bart. Even though we have advised him to stay in his room, he has decided to leave and pursue some trivial matter." Michael and Bart were both disappointed to hear that Eyes Vanderbilt was absent from today's meeting. Bart wanted to introduce his pride and joy to his father, but the old man seemed to be busy with some other thing. It was a bit dismaying. "Is there some kind of problem?" Michael asked out loud. From the way the old man phrased his words, he made it seem like there was some kind of complication that they couldn't solve without the main Vanderbilt man himself. "Your child is very astute," the old man sighed. "There is indeed a problem. Although we would like to give young Michael a lot more monetary funding and assistance, without Eyes here himself, it will not be possible." Bart stood up, indignation painted on his face. "What do you mean? I thought you said my son deserves all the help from the family." The old man raised his hand and tried to calm down Bart. "Truthfully, none of us were expecting the little Michael to be this talented. We only heard that he was good at magic. Because of that, we only decided on a lesser inheritance for him. If we had known that Michael would receive a supreme skill, we would have planned to endow him with more inheritance and let him study abroad with the best care possible." Bart rubbed his hair in frustration. "Can't you change that? That is the problem. If Eyes is here, then he can certainly overturn the decision. But unfortunately, he is unavailable at this time." Lilia also stood up. "Should we reschedule this meeting then?" But the old man shook his head. Unfortunately, after today, the leftover inheritance will be divided up by the entire lineage. By the time Eyes gets back, there will be nothing left for Michael to receive. Do not worry. It's not as if the inheritance Michael will receive is something to scoff at. We will give the entire territory of the parched lands to Michael, the youngest son of the Vanderbilt family. Upon hearing this, Bart couldn't help but sigh in relief. The elder board of directors made it seem like Michael wasn't going to receive anything good. But Bart knew that although the parched lands was a barren wasteland, it was still a large enough estate that Michael could sell for a lot of money. Parched lands? Dad, what's that? Michael asked Bart. The parched lands is a large territory south of our continent. Most of it is uninhabitable, so there are only monsters and demi-humans living there. Oh, right. You asked me earlier where we can get that petroleum oil that you've been asking about for your engine project, right? Well, most of it can be found in the parched lands. Once Michael heard that, an idea suddenly popped up in his mind. It was so crazy that he almost felt goosebumps from it. In his previous world, wars were waged only for the sole reason of oil acquisition. This world still treated petroleum oil as nothing useful other than lighting fires. But Michael knew about their true potential. Since he had already invented the engine, he could finally harness electrical energy using petroleum oil as fuel. So much flashed through his mind. Light bulbs, trains, heating, cars, everything was possible with petroleum oil. What if I move there? I can build my own house that works entirely on electricity. And in the future, if he started to sell his inventions to the world, they would finally realize the true potential of petroleum oil. Now, who would be the one to provide oil for them? It would be the guy who owned the parched lands. The potential for business was too tempting to pass up. Michael, this is good, Bart and Lilia said to their son with excitement. If you sell the parched lands, you can have more than 100 million gold coins. This is already a sizable inheritance. Michael could only laugh for now. He was inwardly preparing himself for when he revealed his plans to move there. His mother would surely have a fit. A couple of days after Michael and his family left the Vanderbilt kingdom, a welcoming celebration commenced in the entire estate. Horns blared with the sounds of thousands of soldiers marching towards the kingdom walls. Today was the day that Eyes Vanderbilt would return to his kingdom. The whole lineage inside the kingdom celebrated, treating it as if he had returned from a victorious war against another country. But the truth was nothing as grandiose as that. Sure, Eyes Vanderbilt was accompanied by a 10,000-man army wherever he went, but that didn't mean he went off to fight in a war. That was just because his safety was vitally important to the Vanderbilt family and the country itself. His children and his grandchildren all gathered at the large plaza square, waving their handkerchiefs as a sign of respect for the Vanderbilt founding father. But despite the celebrations and fanfare, when the grand chariot and carriage entered the plaza, it simply continued on its way and ignored all the people trying to catch Eyes' attention. It didn't stop for a single second. This was quite unusual. Grandfather Vanderbilt enjoyed festivities and welcoming parties like this, usually lasting for many days up to a week. He would spend lavish amounts of money for performances, drinking, eating, and many such celebrations. Many wondered what was wrong, but they could only speculate to themselves. Eyes wasted no time and went directly to his mansion and entered his chambers. He sat on his throne, his hands on his forehead. Silence filled the throne room. Eyes Vanderbilt was a man who had gray-white hair, sagging eye bags, a face full of wrinkles, and a stooping posture. But even then, his presence was still as wild as a lion about to pounce. The board of directors next to him was nervous. It was never good when Eyes was this silent. Finally, one of them dared to speak up. "How was the trip, sire?" The old man next to him asked awkwardly, trying not to offend him. "Have you done what you wanted with that new company called Reborn?" The reason why Eyes Vanderbilt left his estate in his great old age was because he heard a little rumor. There seemed to be an up-and-coming new company called Reborn, who had been sweeping the cities and disrupting the local market with their new and innovative products. There was even a rumor that the Vanderbilt business in Kingsbridge City was starting to fall behind this upstart company after only 5 years. Some of his wizard friends even became addicted to a strange board game called Reborn Chess. Naturally, Eyes had his men investigate the Reborn company and their products. Eyes thought that they were using underhanded schemes to topple the Vanderbilt business. But once he held the Reborn soap and shampoo in his hands, he finally realized the genius and innovation this company had. Not only that, but the techniques and marketing strategy they employed were something that made even him impressed. Eyes felt that whoever was at the helms of Reborn was someone who could someday try to contend with the big leagues like him. This sparked a competitive fire within the old man, a fire that had not been lit in such a long time. Even though Kingsbridge was a small little city on the outskirts of the province, Eyes felt that no Vanderbilt business should ever be outdone by some new company that was wet behind the ears. So, he and a few of his most trusted people spent a year planning and experimenting with products that were better or at least at the same level as the products that Reborn was putting out into the market. And they found it. They were able to create a soap that was much more fragrant than Reborn soap. It lasted much longer, and most of all, it cost less to produce. They did the same with the shampoo and the revolutionary matchstick. And using the help of his friends from the Guild of Arcana, they were able to create an even more complicated board game called Battlefield Strike. Eyes wanted to destroy Reborn in Kingsbridge before they could even try to expand to other cities. He was so sure that his products would prevail against Reborn. So sure, in fact, that Eyes traveled all the way to Kingsbridge just to observe how the whole thing unfolded. This led him to miss the meeting with Michael. When he arrived at Kingsbridge, the impossible happened. When they put out their superior products into the Kingsbridge market, there was no one buying their products. Even though they were objectively better and much cheaper than Reborn products, barely anyone was buying from them. When they investigated this further, it turned out that Reborn had just come out with another revolutionary product called the plumbing system. Not only that, they were even solving the polluted river water problem in their city with something called a sewer system. This pushed the popularity of Reborn into the skies, with every citizen in Kingsbridge becoming loyal to the Reborn company. Eyes was impressed by the plumbing system, but that could be replicated by anyone else. However, what truly made a mark on the old man was how Reborn was able to completely make an entire city loyal to their products. He had never seen this before. It was truly mind-blowing. So, he could only return to his kingdom and brood about his loss. A formidable opponent has come, Eyes muttered to himself, his voice low and commanding. The future would be an exciting time. Even though he lost, Eyes was itching for a fight with Reborn. However, he didn't have much time. He was already quite old. Eyes could only hope that his inheritor would be able to fight against the eventual rise of Reborn and still keep the Vanderbilt name at the top of the world. He shook his head. If only my descendants were just a fraction as talented as the mastermind from Reborn, I would die happily. But no, they're all naive and idiotic. It's my fault, really. I pampered them so much that they didn't have the killer instincts to survive in this world. They'll sink the ship I built by hand. If it was possible, I would rather entrust the entire Vanderbilt business to that Reborn mastermind. At least then, I would know that my business is in good hands. I sighed. He must have been lacking so much sleep to think about stuff like that. It was no use thinking about stuff that he could not control. He decided to go to sleep for now. But before he could stand up, a bell resounded in the throne room. Ding! Dong! Eyes' eyes were led to a strange, new contraption in the corner of the room. It looked like a cabinet with a circular face that had lines near its circumference. And once he listened closely, he heard the rhythmic tick-tock sound coming from the object. "What is that?" he asked his advisors. The old man next to him bowed. "That is a gift from Bart Vanderbilt, sire. It's called a clock, which seemed to have been made by his youngest son, Michael." Eyes got up off his chair and slowly approached the clock. It was only now that he noticed its incredible craftsmanship. And within a few seconds of observing how the clock ticked in a constant manner, he immediately predicted that this was a machine made to keep an accurate track of time. When Bart Vanderbilt and his family visited the kingdom a few days ago, they brought a gift for you to add to your collection, the old man explained. "We don't know what it's for, but we didn't want to offend them." Eyes continued to inspect the clock, even opening the latch to look at the mechanism hidden inside. "This clock," Eyes uttered, "it will revolutionize the entire way life works in the entire world." The board of directors looked at each other with confused looks. When they first received this gift from Bart, they didn't think much of it. They thought it was just some kind of decoration that made a funny sound every so often. But Ai's praise for the clock made them reevaluate its true worth. "What are you talking about, sire?" Ai's rubbed his chin, gazing at the clock with a bit of a smile. "This clock will allow us to coordinate everything with more precision, with time no longer becoming a vague and abstract concept." As expected of Ai's Vanderbilt, he deciphered the clock's true uses even though he had only observed the construct for a few minutes. "Do you know the reason why it is so hard to coordinate business between large distances? Do you know why we lose millions of golds every month?" he asked his advisors. The board of directors pondered over Ai's question until one of them answered. "It's because we cannot communicate with accuracy over large distances. We waste time having to send messengers to our businesses overseas." Ai's nodded. "That is correct. Now imagine if our people overseas have a clock of their own. If we told them to send the shipment of products at the 7th line of this clock early in the morning, then they would do exactly as we said without any deviation. They would deliver the shipment on time, without any delay. Do you see the potential this could bring to our businesses? Do you see how this could change the way the whole world works?" The board of directors weren't idiots. Once Ai's enlightened them about the true uses of the clock, they quickly understood the implications of this simple contraption into the world. "My gosh, it is as you say, sire. This clock will be the key to creating a more organized workforce. Not to mention, there are also a lot of uses aside from commerce. It can be used in navigation, clerical organizations, and even magical advancements. I know of a particular mage who would want a clock for himself to create better potions. We have been underestimating this clock." The board of directors were ashamed that they didn't understand the importance of Bart's gift to them. Ai's then looked back at his advisors. "You say that Bart's kid created this." Even though Ai's knew Bart wasn't the type to lie, he still couldn't believe that a 10-year-old child was able to create such an innovative contraption all by himself. He knew the kid was talented in magic, but he didn't know he was intelligent in craftsmanship as well. Is it really possible for a kid like that to create something as complicated as this? Ai's asked his advisors. The board of directors all looked at each other, awkwardness spreading among them. "Actually, sire, there is a development with Michael that we did not expect." The old man explained everything that happened when Michael and Bart visited the kingdom. They told him that Michael had a magical talent that surpassed even that of the geniuses in Magic Tower. They told him of his talent in craftsmanship and innovations as well. And most of all, they told him that during his talent awakening, he was able to obtain a supreme skill. With that kind of repertoire of talents, it wasn't that hard to believe that Michael created the clock all by himself without any help. Upon hearing this, Ai's Vanderbilt sauntered over to his throne and sat down. He was in deep thought, looking far off into the distance. Ai's was starting to realize something. All the pieces were starting to come together until they congealed into one single fact that lingered on his mind. Goosebumps. Ai's felt his hair stand up on end. This realization was so shocking that he couldn't help but start to smile. And eventually, this smile turned into a laugh, which then further escalated until only his cackling resounded through the throne room. The board of directors looked at Ai's with concern painted on their faces. They wondered if the legendary Vanderbilt lion had finally lost his marbles after all this time. "My luck hasn't dried up yet, it seems," Ai said, looking up at the ceiling as if he were thanking a certain goddess. "What do you mean?" his advisor asked. "Here I thought that no one in the Vanderbilt lineage had inherited my killer instinct for business. But as it turned out, everything was passed down into the youngest son of the Vanderbilt family." The board of directors was still clueless. That craftsmanship, that intelligence, that innovation, and most importantly, his gift from the goddess. I'm certain Michael is the owner of Reborn. It was only unfortunate that Ai's wasn't here when Michael visited the kingdom. He could have seen the kid's marvelous intellect with his own eyes. He could have taken him in and poised him to become his successor. Now, they were probably angry at him for missing such an important event. He was probably resented because Michael was only given a paltry inheritance. The legendary Vanderbilt lion would only later learn how much of a mistake his absence that day became. It would be his biggest regret in his entire life. Eyes then looked at his advisors with a crazed expression. "What did Michael inherit from me?" "The parched lands, sire," the old man answered. "Ha ha ha." Eyes laughed once again, displaying an energy that none of them had ever seen before in the last 50 years. "Perhaps this is also fate. Ha ha. Michael, if you do have that killer instinct like me, you won't let go of the chance to create your own legacy. Come, show me what you can do with that barren old wasteland. Show me how you can build Reborn into a global business that can contend with mine. If you do, then I will not hesitate to give you the entire wealth of the Vanderbilt business." After returning to their home, Michael immediately started to prepare himself for the presentation of a lifetime. He had to completely convince his parents of his plan to relocate to the parched lands. His father would probably agree, but his mother, on the other hand, would definitely try to stop him in any way she possibly could. To make the conversation work better, he served them breakfast on bed, giving them delicious pancakes, bacon, and eggs. "Mom, Dad, I have a favor to ask you," Michael said, trying to act as innocent as possible. "Remember when I received the inheritance of the parched lands?" Well, Michael went on to give them his entire plan, which consisted of staying in the parched lands and creating his own house there. He told them that the only way he could improve his inventions was if he stayed at the place where petroleum oil was abundant. He even briefly told them about the concept of electricity and other uses of energy. "Michael, are you serious? The parched lands is not something that a 10-year-old boy can survive alone. Not to mention its inhabitability. It is also filled with lawless monsters that will tear you to shreds." Bart lectured. "Yes, father, but I can take care of myself," Michael replied. "How are you going to survive by yourself? What will you eat? What will you drink? Where will you live? Who will protect you?" What's interesting was that Bart continued to ask Michael questions about his plans to move to the parched lands, but he didn't explicitly deny his request. Michael just needed to convince his father so that he would give the go-ahead. He answered Bart's questions with very detailed plans. Because of his mastery in magic, he would be able to sustain himself even if there was no food or water in the environment. As long as there was mana in the air, he could survive even in outer space. As for the question of his survivability, Michael showed them the power of his absolute unity defense skill, which made him invulnerable to any spell or magic that was below the 5th level. Upon hearing this, Bart realized how much of a monstrous wizard his son turned out to be. The only creatures that could contend with his 10-year-old son were monsters from the deep sea or creatures from the Black Continent. And once Michael told Bart about his plans to continue inventing new and innovative products to sell in Reborn, he couldn't help but start to agree that this was the best course of action for his son. Bart was starting to get convinced. Michael inwardly celebrated as he saw the approving look on his father. Now, the only other obstacle he needed to get over with was his mother. She was strangely quiet throughout all of this. Bart questioned Michael relentlessly to make sure that he was fully prepared for what he was getting himself into, but Lilia simply just sat at her bed and kept quiet. "Mom!" Lilia's body started to shake. "You can't expect me to leave my boy alone in the desert," she uttered in a low voice. Michael knew that if he didn't do anything, his mother would definitely explode. So, he immediately brought out Fudge, the rogue slime, and introduced him to his parents. "Mom, look, this is Fudge, and he can split himself and inhabit all kinds of objects." Then, he ruffled through his pockets until he took out a small wooden doll that looked exactly like himself, with the same golden hair and expression, all with movable limbs. "Fudge, go," Michael said, as he threw the slime into the ground. The rogue slime split himself into two, with its clone jumping up and inhabiting the wooden doll to become its shadow. "Ahem, ahem," Michael whispered to himself, and his voice suddenly echoed through the wooden doll. "See, Mom? We can still communicate with the doll. You can always keep it with you, allowing me to always be with you in spirit." This was Michael's solution to the long-distance problem that his mother was so worried about. Since Fudge's clones were connected to Michael, he could easily speak through any one of its clones as if he was by their side. Lilia slowly picked up the doll and inspected it with trembling hands. Always, always with me, she muttered to herself, clutching the doll in her chest. Michael, it's best if you leave me with your mother alone for now. She'll need the night to think it over, Bart said. Michael respected their wishes and left them alone to ponder over their decision. Leaving a 10-year-old kid alone in the wilderness was not an easy thing to decide. Later at night, Bart held Lilia's hands to try and talk some sense into her. Honey, I think that this is the right decision for Michael. He won't progress if we keep him in our estate for too long. We need to let him loose and spread his wings. This is a good opportunity for him. If he shows his talent and creates something incredible in the parched lands, it could catch the attention of my father. It will make him regret that he treated Michael as just another one of his grandchildren. I'm sure of it, but we can't help him. Michael has to build it on his own. So we have to let him leave and build his own nest in the parched lands, no matter how much you want to join him. Despite his words, Lilia didn't seem to be interested in listening to him. Instead, she kept on looking at the Michael doll in her hands. Always with me. This is even better. I'll have my own Michael right in my pocket. Lilia screamed, catching Bart off guard. Honey, but Lilia ignored him. Instead, he called out to the doll. Fudge, that's your name, right? Will you come out for a second? The doll's shadow cast from the candlelight in the room suddenly morphed and shifted to form the cute Fudge, complete with his rogue attire. Yes, ma'am. Fudge, at your service. The slime adorably saluted. Now, you'll be a good boy and tell me everything that will happen to Michael, right? Lilia said, a crazed look painted on her eyes. Fudge nodded. Yes, ma'am. I will do as you say. I will tell you everything that will happen to Michael. Every detail, Lilia corrected. The slime nodded fervently, afraid of offending Michael's mother. Good, good, she muttered. After a few seconds of silence, Fudge built up the courage to speak up. Ma'am, since you are so devoted to Michael, would you like to learn about a little club I'm trying to form? Lilia's eyebrows raised. I'm listening. The next day, Michael was overjoyed to learn that his parents allowed him to pursue his ambition. Of course, there were a lot of caveats with that decision. First of all, he had to make regular check-ins with his parents, but that could easily be solved through Fudge and the wooden puppet that his mother already named Michael too. Next, he would need to make regular visits to the estate during the holidays, which Michael was okay with. Finally, Bart and Lilia were allowed to visit him again after a year. Michael thought this was weird because he welcomed them visiting him anytime they wanted, but Bart insisted on having a 1-year buffer. His father wanted to make sure that he built everything on his own without any intervention for at least 1 year. Since this didn't really affect Michael much, he agreed. They all decided that Michael would start his journey after winter, with spring starting about 1 to 2 months from today. This gave enough time for Michael to prepare for the journey there. Since it would take about a month's worth of travel to reach the parched land from the Vanderbilt estate, Michael decided to create his own personalized carriage to get through the harsh journey. When they traveled to the Vanderbilt kingdom, Michael's greatest gripe about the journey was how uncomfortable the ride was. Whenever there was a bump in the road, the entire carriage would bob up and down, making good sleep extremely hard to achieve. Compared to the smooth car rides in his previous life, Michael found any carriage made in this world extremely uncomfortable, even if it was the most expensive one they could purchase. To make his month-long journey a little bit better, Michael installed a suspension system within the wheels. The bumps would only register as a small movement inside the carriage, allowing for a smooth ride. Upon showing his new invention to his father, the man couldn't help but applaud him. You're right, Michael. This would make travel so much easier, Bart said, inspecting the wheels by pushing it up and down. It will be the perfect carriage, except for one thing. You seem to have forgotten the most important aspect of a carriage, Bart said. Where's the horse supposed to be attached? Michael's carriage had an extended front bumper, leaving no space for the horse to be positioned in. There weren't even any buckles for the rope to be attached to. How is this carriage supposed to move without a horse, son? Magic, Bart asked in a joking manner. But Michael's response to that was a simple smile and a shrug of the shoulders. He opened the door of the carriage, leaving Bart clueless as to what his son was planning. After a few seconds, A resounding vroom vroom echoed through the estate. Bart was so surprised that he ended up jumping backwards. He almost thought there was a monster hidden inside the carriage. "Michael? What's going on?" he asked. But before he could go up to peek at Michael, the carriage suddenly started to move on its own. And it wasn't just a small movement due to gravity. The wheels moved as if there was a horse pulling on the carriage. Bart couldn't believe his eyes. If he weren't looking at it with his own eyes, he would have thought he was dreaming. Michael's new carriage continued to move through their estate, surprising the maids and butlers at this magical carriage that had no horse. Then, the carriage turned and looped back towards the mansion before stopping right next to Bart. Michael opened the door to the carriage and presented himself with the biggest of smiles. "Dad, this is my new carriage, the automobile." Bart slowly walked over to the carriage and tried to touch an invisible horse. But no matter where he touched, there was no such animal hidden somewhere that powered the carriage's movement. "Son, there's no magic in this carriage, right?" Michael nodded. So how is it moving?" To answer his question, Michael directed him to the elongated bumper in his carriage. He opened up the latch to show an engine powering the wheel's movements. "This is what I've been working on, Dad. This is called an engine, and it can harness energy into movement." He started to explain the basics of an engine and how power from the internal explosion inside allowed the wheels to move by itself. Since he only had a month to make this, the car was very basic. It only had an accelerator, a brake, and a wheel as its features. Michael was going to improve the automobile in the future, but for now, as long as it could move, then he was satisfied with it. "All you needed was petroleum oil?" Bart asked, his voice starting to crack. "Yes, Dad. As long as there's enough fuel in the engine, the carriage can continue to move indefinitely. It's fast, too. We can turn a month of traveling into just a few days." Bart couldn't believe that such a simple and overlooked material could power something that only magic could do. It was only now that he realized why his son was so adamant in moving to the parched lands. With petroleum oil, he could create so many more world-breaking inventions that everyone can use. He could already picture a world where everyone was using his son's inventions every day. Honey, look at what our son made," Bart said, dragging Lilia to see Michael's automobile. Once Michael introduced the car to his mother, she couldn't help but shower Michael with praise. "Amazing. You're so intelligent," Lilia said, but strangely enough, she directed her compliment at Michael too, not the human Michael. Lilia had taken quite a liking to the wooden puppet this past month, which became a bit worrying since she would always address the puppet instead of Michael. "Mom, I'm right here," Michael said, waving his hands in front of his mother. Yes, you are," Lilia said, stroking Michael too's hair. "My son is so talented." Michael sighed and chose to ignore that. People tend to deal with difficult stuff in different ways. She still hasn't accepted the fact that she won't see her son for an entire year. Finally, it was time for Michael to embark on this new chapter of his life. His parents, Beretta, Sebastian, and the rest of the maids and butlers all gathered at the entrance, watching as Michael packed the last of his belongings into his automobile. He didn't have much baggage. He just needed some clothes and some snacks to eat along the way. Most of the space was used to store extra fuel for the trip. "Be careful with your journey, young master. We're rooting for you." Beretta and the rest of the maids wiped a tear from their eyes as they looked at the young master. They couldn't believe that he was leaving the nest so soon. Their lives became infinitely more interesting and comfortable ever since Michael came into their lives. Although it was unfortunate they couldn't join him in his journey today, they hoped that they would be able to do it someday. "When you come back, I'll be able to beat you at chess, young master." Sebastian and the rest of the butlers bowed towards him. "Unlikely," Michael joked back, making Sebastian laugh. "Son, I know you'll do great out there. I'll miss you," his father said, hugging Michael. "What do you mean? He'll be right here with us at all times," Lilia said, pointing at Michael too. "But just a part of him will go. Even so, I'll miss that." Finally, she acknowledged the real Michael and gave him a big hug. Michael bid a teary goodbye to his parents and everyone else. He hopped onto his automobile and started the engine. If he continued to stay here, he would probably get a lot more emotional than he wanted. So, he quickly drove the carriage away from the Vanderbilt estate with nothing but a map to lead him to the parched lands. If Michael used a horse-drawn carriage, the whole trip would have taken more than a month with multiple stop-by. But with the automobile, it would only take him about 15 days to reach his destination without having to visit any nearby villages or cities. He would have arrived much sooner, but there wasn't exactly any smooth highway that led his car directly toward the parched lands. The days passed until the luscious green and forest scenery slowly tapered off, replaced by hard, dry ground with barely a blade of grass growing in its midst. This is the optimal place to build your house, ChatJK2 said. Michael was smack dab in the middle of the parched lands. He wasn't in the very deep end, but he also wasn't too near the other civilizations that bordered around the uninhabited territory. This was the perfect place because there was still some greenery and forestry on one side and a desolate desert on the other. He had the best of both worlds. He could plant some crops to sustain himself and still be near enough to the oil depository that the parched lands was so famous for. With his hands on his waist and a can-do attitude, Michael was ready to begin. Well then, ChatJK2, let's start building, shall we? The 4 elemental mana burst out from Michael's cores and flowed to the veins in his hand, making his body glow 4 different colors. Suddenly, multiple trees on the forest side of his territory were uprooted from the ground and slowly floated towards his side. Then, visible wind gusts that resembled a blade suddenly appeared in the air, slicing the trees into a uniform block with perfect accuracy. Mounds of rock emerged from the ground, creating a large foundation for his eventual house. Only mages could understand the complexity of what Michael was doing right now. Not only was he casting spells with different elemental mana, but he was also casting them at the same time with absolute ease. Michael had increased his mastery over 1-star and 2-star magic so much that he could simply think about what he wanted to achieve, and the mana in his body automatically moved the way he wanted them to move. And with the help of ChatJK2, he simply had to watch as his new house got built using magic. It took less than half a day to finally construct his little cabin in the middle of nowhere, made out of both stone and wood. Since he made it from scratch, Michael used modern architecture and style to make him feel even more at home. The house wasn't too large like his parents' mansion, just enough for a 2-story family home that was popular back in his previous life. The kitchen, the living room, the bathroom, and the bedroom were made out of simple materials, but exuded casual elegance. His house looked like one of those summer house cottages that rich millionaires had back in his previous life. Now that the basics were done, his next order of business was the most exciting part for him. He wanted to power his house with electricity. He constructed a new home with electricity already in mind. He created the electrical system along with the plumbing system in the very structure of the house itself. Now he just needed an energy source to connect them to. Of course, he already had a plan in mind for that. He was going to build a steam turbine. The principle was simple. He just had to heat water, which would turn into steam. That steam would then travel through pipes and cause the turbine blades to spin rapidly, which would be converted into electrical energy through a generator. ChatJK2 handled all the specifics and the main blueprint for the plans, while Michael was in charge of procuring the materials for the large project. Not only that, he also had to find an oil deposit where he could dig up for fuel. So, on the second day of moving into the parched lands, Michael journeyed deeper into the desolated parts of the territory in search of a place that was rich in earth mana. But as he journeyed through the desert-like environment of the parched lands, he suddenly heard a notification from ChatJK2. Superior Golden Nose Skill activated. There is a high likelihood that you will encounter individuals with high talent. Michael became excited. Part of the reason why he wanted to relocate to the parched lands was because of the potentially talented monsters that he could come across. Ever since he discovered he could awaken their talent, a whole new realm of possibilities entered his mind. People overlooked monsters and beasts as nothing more than instinctual creatures with no potential. But ever since he met Fudge, he realized that monsters were as talented as humans. So, he welcomed this sudden encounter. He stopped his automobile and immediately got out to observe his surroundings. From his perspective, there was not a single piece of living being anywhere he looked. There were just an endless wasteland of cracked soil and the occasional tumbleweed that rolled in the distance. Skills didn't lie, so Michael knew that there was a living being somewhere here, but he just couldn't see them through normal means. He used his supreme skill, mana gathering, to maximize his sensitivity in mana, allowing him to see and feel everything that his eyes could not see. Earth mana was the most abundant, followed by air and fire. As expected, he didn't find much water mana in the ground except for thin clouds in the sky. But as he narrowed his eyes upon the small mounds of sand and soil, he saw a collection of light mana, something that only living beings emitted. Strangely enough, the light mana in those figures were starting to fade, blinking in and out of existence as if they were about to expire and turn into dark mana, which only the dead emitted. They were running out of time. He had to act now. Michael's body immediately started to glow a silver light, with air mana gathering at his feet and propelling him into the sky, reaching speeds faster than his automobile. With his 3-star spell, Burst Fly, he was able to reach the dying figures just in time. Upon landing, Michael set his eyes on a small group of animals that resembled primates back in his previous life. They lay on the ground huddled together, with their chests heaving for air. Their breaths became shallower and shallower each time. Michael raised his hand and looked up at the skies. Right now, the only thing that was going to save them was an injection of light mana into their bodies. Usually, he would see an abundance of light mana everywhere through the trees, grass, and nature in the surroundings. But this place had none of that. So, his only source of light mana was the sun. He stared at the great big ball of fire and grabbed it in his hands. Suddenly, visible light blobs floated down from the skies and gathered at his palms. Then, he shoved the light mana into the dying animals, infusing them with life. Slowly, the primates' breathing got better and better, with the pained expressions on their faces disappearing into relief. They were fine for now, but this was only a temporary solution. With the 3-star spell, Medical Inspect, he found out that these animals needed water and food. So, he brought them back to his automobile and drove them back to his house. Michael observed the primates who were slowly awakening from unconsciousness. Chat JK2, what kind of creatures are they? Before Michael left, his father gave him a complete bestiary of all the known beasts, monsters, and demi-humans populating the parched lands. So, ChatJK2 had no trouble identifying the creatures. According to the bestiary, there are species called mankeys. They are the weakest species in the entire territory of the parched lands, and possibly the entire world. They do not have any special characteristics or traits that help them survive the harsh environment of the parched lands. The only reason why their species has survived to this day is because of the unity within their kind. Mankeys. Species: yellow mankeys. Type: demi-human. Difficulty: element: none. Michael observed the mankeys and found that they had vaguely human-like faces, similar to Neanderthals back in his previous world. Their entire body was covered in stained, yellow fur, including parts of their faces. They also had a tail on their backs, which was why Michael thought they were primates when he first saw them. Michael waited for the yellow mankeys to regain consciousness. He already fed them food and water a while ago, so they were close to waking up. After a few minutes, the 5 mankeys slowly opened their eyes one by one. Their eyes showed confusion as they came to grips with their current situation. They patted their bodies, surprised as to how they survived the intense heat of the sun. Then, they looked around at their new and strange environment until they saw Michael looking over at them. These creatures weren't stupid. They knew that they should have died in the heat of the desert, but were somehow saved by this benevolent being. The 5 yellow mankeys immediately bowed to him, showing their deference to the one that saved them. "Thank you. We beg for mercy. Indebted we are of you." They were demi-humans, which meant that they were capable of speaking the human language, albeit a little slower and simpler than 5-year-old humans. Still, This made communicating much easier. It's fine. I couldn't let you guys die in the heat of the sun, could I? By the way, what were you doing in the middle of the desert? He asked them. The 5 mankeys all kneeled in front of Michael and explained, with a limited vocabulary, about the circumstances that led them to a near-death experience. From what Michael understood, it seemed that they journeyed out of their village and into the desert in search of food and water. But unfortunately, the heat of the sun coupled with the lack of water in their bodies became far too much to bear. They lost their strength and ended up disoriented in the desert. They wandered around until finally they succumbed to the conditions. We thank benevolent being, but we must go. Yes, we must find water for village. Michael walked over to his kitchen island and turned a lever on his sink, allowing the water to flow freely into a wooden cup in his hands. If it's water you want, then you can take it with you, he said with the most casual voice. The 5 mankeys all had wide eyes as they looked at the precious, life-saving water flowing like rain from that strange metal thing. Wow, water! Oh, water! Tears flowed from the mankeys' eyes. They had searched far and wide through the desert to find water. They would have never thought they would see so much water flowing from a strange metal thing. Please, benevolent being, we offer our lives for water. We will sacrifice our lives in exchange for water. Michael waved off their seriousness. Please, there's no need for that. You can take all the water you want for free. Oh, and I have some fruit and dried meat here with me. Would you like some of that too? The mankeys all looked at Michael with confusion painted on their faces. For them, water was even more precious than gold. People died in the desert just to get a few drops of water for their family. But now, Michael wanted to give them all the water they needed. For free. Any person would be confused when someone wanted to give them a bar of pure gold without asking for anything in return. We will pay for the water with our lives. They thought that Michael was someone who simply had a large stock of water in reserve. They thought he was just one of those extremely fortunate beings who was able to witness rain and store it for themselves. Don't worry, I can have all the water I need, Michael said as he raised his hand and manifested a ball of water in his hand. Upon seeing this, the yellow mankeys prostrated themselves even deeper. Wizard, sorcery, water bearer. We become slaves for sorcerer in exchange for water. Michael felt sorry for these mankeys. As a species, they lived at the very bottom of the food chain. They felt as if they couldn't offer anything to Michael aside from giving him their lives. Unlike most monsters and demi-humans, they didn't have talent in any magic, which meant that their species had absolutely no chance of harnessing the power of the mana elements. But Michael didn't think they were completely useless. After all, he had heard of a species who didn't have any magic and was able to become the top species of the world with nothing but their intelligence and innovation. It was the humans from his previous life. Michael knew that mankeys had the same potential as them. He just had to give them the opportunity. Benevolent being, we are at your service. Yes, we will do anything. Even if it meant slaving away in the heat of the sun, they were willing to do anything as long as they could pay for water. And in their desperation, one of the mankeys walked up to Michael and bowed at his feet. In that moment of contact, Michael heard ChatJK2's voice ring out inside his head. Supreme skill, gift bestowal activated. Yellow mankey, potential talent, S-class engineer extraordinaire. Potential skill, blueprint manifestation. The user will gain the ability to show a 3-dimensional projection of a blueprint in his mind onto the real world, allowing workers to accurately build the project without any errors or imperfections. Michael's face lit up as he realized that this specific mankey was the one he sensed to have incredible talent. And luckily enough, this mankey's talent was perfect for his plans in the future. If you really want to pay for the water, then there is something that I need help with. The mankeys looked up at Michael with anticipation. Finally, they could be of use. Finally, they could offer their lives to save the families back in their village. I want you to awaken, he said with a smile. The mankeys all looked at each other, confused as to what Michael was talking about. After all, they were mankeys. They weren't humans who could awaken a talent and transcend into a powerful being. Apologies, we are useless. We cannot awaken. We have no purpose. Michael shook his head. Just trust me. I can awaken your talents and show you that you have potential. I can show you that you can do much greater things. His words made the Mankeys look up at Michael with wonder in their eyes. He looked at them with a different gaze, as if he truly believed that, as Mankeys, they could achieve more than begging and scavenging for sustenance to survive. First, what are your names? Michael asked. The Mankey in the middle looked up at Michael. Apologies, we have no name. Demi-humans like the Mankeys lived simple lives, needing no names to refer to each other. Well, let me give you one then, Michael said as he raised his hand. Chat JK2, awaken its talent, please. Understood. Awakening its talents. A golden light shone from his hand, emitting a kind of power that felt cool and refreshing for the Mankey. The creature felt as if it was bathing in the rain, with water nourishing it from the inside and out. Suddenly, its body started to glow with a white light, enveloping its entire body until it was obscured into a blinding shroud of light. After a few seconds, the light died down. The Mankey in the middle used to have a hunched back, with its hands almost touching the ground like an ape. But now it was standing upright, even taller than Michael. Fur was still covering its body, but now there were patterns all over its body that resembled geometric shapes. The previously stained and dirted color of the fur on its body was now yellow like the sun, with the pattern having a golden streak that seemed to glow under the sun. Its face looked much more human, with refined facial features that would have made him indistinguishable from other people. However, the fur on the sides of its face made it sure that they were a completely different species from humans. What would you like to name this Mankey? Asked ChatJK2. Michael reminded the Mankeys of a very iconic character in his previous life called Wukong. Kong, that's his name. Downloading the entire syllabus course on mechanical engineering to Kong. Complete. Kong looked at his body, surprised at his new stature. His mind felt much more open than before, as if an entire new perspective on the world was opening up in its brain. He felt more conscious, more aware of his surroundings. It felt as if he ascended into a new realm of reality. Kong. Magic a class. Element mastery. Unity element. Magic purity, 90%. Mana quantity, not applicable. Species, sapient yellow Mankey. Type, machinist Mankey. Talent, S-class engineer extraordinaire. Realm, 1-star engineer. Skills, blueprint manifestation. Lesser unity gathering. Lesser unity defense. Kong looked at his hands, fully aware that he could do so much more than before. He felt like he could do anything. He immediately looked at Michael and bowed at his feet. Thank you, benevolent being. You have saved me and given me a new life. I accept my name as Kong and vow to serve as your loyal servant. The rest of the Mankeys looked at Kong with eyes of wonder and astonishment. They could barely believe that he was the same Mankey that they had known all their lives. Are you really a Mankey? You change a lot. Hair change, body change, but Mankey same? Kong chuckled. Yes, I'm still the same Mankey as before, he said to them. But I have changed. I have evolved to something better. The rest of the Mankeys ogled at Kong's new appearance. They surrounded him and playfully picked at his fur. Not only did Kong's appearance change, his whole aura became completely different to that of a normal Mankey. Kong passively absorbed the elemental mana in his body due to the lesser mana gathering skill he obtained from Michael. Water, air, fire, and most importantly water, was gathering at his skin and nourishing his body with power. He was no longer the same skinny and emaciated Mankey that was on the brink of death. The rest of the Mankeys felt this kind of presence only in higher beings and more complex demi-humans like the dwarves and the elves. Those beings were at the top, comparable only to humans. And now, the Mankey that was standing right in front of them was emitting the same kind of strength as those powerful species. They couldn't believe it. This led them to revere and worship Michael even more. They thought that the only being that could change a species being was a god. Now, they treated Michael as one too. Benevolent holy being. We worship. Michael stopped them before things got too out of hand. "Guys, please stop it. I'm not some kind of god," he said, waving his hands. But how could they stop worshiping him when he single-handedly saved their species from extinction? Now that Kong had evolved into the next line of his species, he now held the power to change the course of life in the village. They bowed to him even deeper. Michael felt burdened with all this worship. He had to clap his hands and get their attention. "Now, who wants to evolve next?" he asked them. The rest of the Mankeys looked at Michael with confused faces. They thought that he was done with Kong. After all, a power that could change Kong into a superior species must take some kind of toll on Michael, right? Kong had to convince his fellow Mankeys that Michael had enough power to awaken the talents of thousands upon thousands of Mankeys and never even break a sweat. When he awakened, Kong was able to briefly observe just a smidgen of Michael's true power. And with what he could see, Kong felt as if he was looking at an endless horizon of an ocean. Michael's power was endless. Finally, after a few minutes, Michael awakened the talents of the other 4 Mankeys. The 3 Mankeys only had a talent in the C class and below. One of them had the D class metallurgy mender, with a corresponding skill that allowed him to handle metal with ease. The other had a talent called C class wooden whisperer, which was very useful in growing and making trees prosper even in the harshest of environments. The other had a D class Taurus keeper, which meant that he was talented in breeding and taking care of cows. The last Mankey was the most surprising. First of all, unlike the rest of the Mankeys, this one evolved with barely no fur on their skin. And if anyone were to look at this Mankey with no context, they would mistake it for a human woman. Her face was defined with feminine features that could be considered quite beautiful in most cultures. And instead of having yellow fur with patterned golden streaks, she had long, flowing yellow hair and eyebrows with similar patterned golden streaks. The only thing that distinguished her from a human was the tail on her back, which was still colored yellow and gold. Michael named her Anne, which she quickly accepted. "Greetings, Boss Michael," and "At your service," she said, with her tail wagging back and forth rapidly. But that wasn't the only thing that was special with her. Michael was surprised to find that she had an even better talent than Kong. In Magic S class, Element Mastery, Unity Element, Magic Purity, 95%, Mana Quantity, Not Applicable, Species, Sapient Yellow Mankey, Type, Agricultural Mankey, Talent, SS Class, Cultivation Idol, Realm, 1-star Farmer, Skills, Greenhouse, any crop that the user plants will grow regardless of the season or weather. Multiplicative Harvest, the user will be able to harvest multiple times from a single crop. Lesser Unity Gathering, Lesser Unity Defense. Michael was mistaken. It seemed that she was the one that his superior golden nose was talking about. He searched through the entirety of Kingsbridge using Fudge's clones to see if anyone else had a good talent, but the best ones he saw were only A class. Now, he met 2 beings at the S class or higher in the Parched Lands, of all places. "Boss, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for this gift. You will not be disappointed in taking a chance on us. We make your words come true. We will achieve greater things than even we can imagine," and said, tapping her heart. The rest of the evolved Mankeys thanked Michael, showing their sincerity to the man that changed their lives for the better. Kong approached Michael and kneeled. "Boss, we are ready to fulfill any of your orders." Michael shook his head. Although there were a lot of things he wanted to do, he didn't want to forget the most important thing in the world. "I want you to lead me to your village," he said with a serious tone. "They need water, right? We should go now. We can't waste any time." Kong and the rest of the Mankeys felt emotions welling up in their eyes. Michael had no reason to save their village, yet it was his first priority. "Yes, boss. Thank you," they all shouted. Using the automobile, Michael and the newly evolved yellow Mankeys traveled through the desert to find their village. The wheels jumped through the cracks in the ground and maneuver through cactuses as Kong did his best to recall their village's location. Finally, Michael's eyes caught sight of a large collection of life mana in the distance. Using a simple 1-star spell called Telescopic Sight, he was able to confirm the location of the village. Strangely enough, The village was located on a large crater, which made it almost undetectable in the vast valley of the desert. As soon as he parked the automobile, the Mankeys all rushed out and looked down to their village. The once vibrant and lively collection of homes made out of mud and clay was now completely covered in a strange black liquid. This was the reason why the village was in dire need of assistance. This strange black liquid had invaded their homes and destroyed their safe haven. This meant that they would have to relocate to a safer place. However, such a large migration of Mankeys would need a lot of resources, especially water. That was the reason why Kong and the other Mankeys journeyed out of their village. They needed resources to resettle. Kong and the rest of the Mankeys jumped down, surprising the rest of the villagers that were hiding within the homes embedded on the sides of the large crater. Children screamed, while their parents tried to shush them from creating any noise. They thought they were getting invaded. The power and magic emanating from these 5 strange figures were unlike any species they had ever encountered before. Even though they had the same yellow fur and monkey-like features, they were completely different from normal Mankeys. They stood tall with pride, with strength, completely foreign for yellow Mankeys. "We surrender. We beg for mercy." One elderly Mankey, with his yellow hair almost turning white and a spine even more curved than a circle, walked out of the homes and confronted the 5 strangers. But upon gazing at these 5 figures, the elderly Mankey felt as if he was looking at something ancient, something transcendent. And somehow, they looked familiar. But that wasn't possible. "It's us," said Anne, but her words did nothing to convince the old man. After all, she looked even more beautiful than most humans. Kong knew that words wouldn't convince the old man. So, he approached him and took the elderly man's hands and respectfully put them over his forehead. This was a cultural act that only Mankeys knew. It was then that the old man's eyes shone in recognition. "You? But how?" The old man's excitement made the other Mankeys hiding in the houses finally come out of their houses. As more and more Mankeys came out, more of them recognized the 5 strangers. A celebration occurred within them, with hugging and jumping spreading through the Mankeys. When they didn't return after a few days, they thought they had all died. But somehow, they didn't just survive. They turned into this completely new Mankey with strength and power that was completely uncharacteristic of the weakest race in the entire world. How did this happen?" they all asked. Kong and then smiled as they pointed upwards. Just then, the village of Mankeys looked up at the skies and saw the figure of the 10-year-old human boy floating in the air. He had his hands in his pocket and a casual smile. Michael slowly floated to the crater, introducing himself to the Mankeys with a simple, "Hello." "He saved us," Kong said, showing his admiration and respect for Michael with just his tone. "He gave us water. He gave us food. He gave us everything we needed to survive without even asking for anything in return," and said, her eyes shining once she started to talk about Michael. They told the whole village that his powers allowed them to transcend from a normal Mankey into this new and better form, filled with talent and magic. The elderly Mankey looked at Michael, disbelief written all over his face. As the oldest one in this village, he had met a lot of humans before, even the most powerful of wizards, yet he hadn't heard of anyone capable of doing this. "Sir," the old man uttered, "why have you come to our village? As you can see, we are close to extinction. The curse of the lands has taken over our home." More than half of the homes were flooded with this strange sludge of black liquid. Some of the houses were completely submerged, making it impossible to live in. These Mankeys considered this to be a curse. But when Michael set his eyes upon this black liquid, he didn't see a curse. He saw liquid gold. It was petroleum oil. This village was smack dab in the middle of an oil well, which had so much oil that they were overflowing to the surface. If America existed in this world, they would have already invaded this land. Michael, of course, wasn't going to let this chance go to waste. "I have come to this village for only one reason," Michael said, addressing everyone in the village. "I came here to give you a chance to live without worrying about food, water, or a place to live." The elderly Mankey shook his head. "We cannot. Offer anything. Michael pointed at the black liquid behind them. If you're willing to give me ownership of that black liquid, I can give you everything you need to survive and more. They wanted nothing more than to survive, than to drink water and eat food every day. And Michael was the person that could give them that. They were ready to do anything for Michael. They were ready to become his slaves. But he wanted nothing more than the black liquid, something they considered a curse. It was too good to be true. To fully convince them that he had nothing but good intentions, Michael snapped his hands, and 5 big barrels of water floated from above and landed down to the village. The elderly Mankey slowly approached the barrel. Upon seeing it filled with cool, refreshing water, the old Mankey's body began to shake. He trembled until finally he couldn't take it and plunged his whole head into the barrel, drinking all the water he wanted to drink. The rest of the Mankeys soon followed, celebrating as they filled their bellies with life-saving water. One by one, Michael awakened the talents of every single Mankey in the village. The once weakest race now had more magical power than even most superior races. The once weakest race who struggled to survive now had knowledge and masteries in jobs that were miles and miles above the current base of knowledge in the world. Most of them had C to a class talents, but that wasn't even the most surprising part. The yellow Mankeys seemed to have talent in some type of production job. Everything from agriculture, carpentry, forestry, and even to cuisine. Usually, Michael would see different types of talents in a given group. When he inspected the talents in Kingsbridge, he saw talents in swordplay, production, singing, and other such jobs with very different varieties. But this village of Mankeys all seemed to have talent in creating some kind of product. Can you tell me why? ChatJK2? Upon inspecting their DNA, there's reason to believe that yellow Mankeys, in particular, have a natural tendency to become talented producers. Michael would have never expected that a single species could produce one single type of talent through all their descendants. Michael didn't dislike this. In fact, it was quite a fortunate stroke of luck that he met these yellow Mankeys. Each of them had a specific talent that could greatly contribute to making his and everyone's life in the parched lands so much more comfortable. After their awakening, they moved into Michael's territory. And on the first day, the newly evolved Mankeys started to reconstruct the homes they had back in their old village. Just as they were gathering mud and sand to create the walls of their houses, Michael immediately stopped them in their tracks. Their homes were completely not up to his standards and were susceptible to a lot of weather conditions. Even though they gained skills and base knowledge about production, they knew nothing about the best way to use them. For example, one of them had the seemingly useless skill called Limestone Finder, which allowed him to search for limestone in his vicinity. Michael immediately got a great idea upon seeing it. He ordered the Mankey to find as much limestone as possible, which he was able to do quite easily. Once given the limestone, Michael went to work. Using a variety of one-star spells, he started to pound the limestone into powder and mixed it with a lot of clay, sand, and other types of aggregates. Once finished, he had a very thick and viscous type of gray material. Any person in his previous world would immediately recognize this material. It was concrete. Michael arranged the concrete into a block and used a heating spell to quickly dry out the water contents in the concrete. And within a few seconds, the concrete started to harden, surprising all Mankeys. They surrounded the solid block, touching it with their hands and knocking on it to try and test its resilience. One of them tried to punch through the concrete block and found himself with nothing but injured knuckles. They couldn't believe it. This strange concrete was even stronger than mud and stone walls. Once Michael taught them how to create their own concrete, all the talented engineers and construction Mankeys like Kong started to implement them into their homes. At the end of the day, the Mankeys spent the rest of their time watching in wonder as the faucets and showers splashed them with water. Whoa, water! I can bathe and drink at the same time. I can't believe it. Do I really have an endless source of water in my own home? This is a miracle. Hooray for our boss Michael. Hooray, they all cheered. Michael, of course, taught Kong the basics of the plumbing system, which he quickly picked up and learned within an hour of lecturing. Then, Kong began to teach the other Mankeys as well, allowing them all to work at the same time and finish building the houses as fast as possible. Since Kong was the most talented engineer in the group, he became the de facto leader of all production in the village. And whenever Michael wanted something done, he would always entrust it to Kong. Meanwhile, and was the leader of her own group as well. As an SS-class talented individual, she became extremely adept in everything agriculture-related. On the forest side of the territory, she and a couple of other Mankeys with agriculture talents began to start a farm system. She incorporated everything she learned about farming into this project, including all the necessary conditions that different crops needed to grow. Right now, she planted any crop that she could find in the forest. This included potatoes, some leafy greens, carrots, and other crops that everyone could eat for nourishment. With the help of Kong and his group of engineers, they were able to incorporate an irrigation system that made watering plants so much easier. Michael was so surprised as he watched the evolved Mankeys do their work. After all, only a day had passed, and yet the whole place had completely changed. His house used to be the only thing in the territory, but now there were a lot of concrete houses under construction near him, with a farm and a quarry surrounding them. This was the true power of the Yellow Mankeys. They were extremely talented in production. He didn't have to worry about managing them at all. So he set his sights on the concrete block near his feet. It was only now that he realized the full potential of concrete in this magical world. In his previous life, concrete became the standard material for construction because of its durability and its availability around the world. But perhaps if concrete had one weakness, it would be the time required for the cement to harden. That was the case for his previous life, but not in this world. With the help of magic, cement could harden within a few seconds. This could revolutionize how construction was made in this world. Michael immediately wanted to contact Castell so that they could sell concrete to the world. Even before he started to sell concrete, Michael wanted to stock up on a lot of it first. After all, this village would also end up using a lot of concrete to finish all the houses and buildings under construction. So he instructed some of the Mankeys to journey out into the desert to try and find a good lime quarry they could tap into. Fortunately, once they returned from their scouting, they found a big one very near to their current location. He instructed them to start mining all of the lime they could get. And to make their jobs easier, he lent them the automobile to haul all the limestone they mined for the day. Of course, he had to teach them how to ride it first. Thankfully, one of them had a talent that allowed him to learn driving quite easily. For now, the amount of limestone they could gather in a day was just enough to supply the whole construction project for the village. However, if Michael wanted to export concrete to the world, then he would need a lot more workers. Lolo, do you know some other Mankeys that can help us? Michael asked the middle-aged-looking Hob Mankey in front of him. He named the elderly Mankey in front of him as Lolo, and after his evolution, he seemed to have de-aged by a couple of years and became a man in the prime of his life. However, the fur covering his entire body remained white, making him look like an albino Mankey. Also, Michael decided to address the evolved Mankeys as Hob Mankeys because he reminded them of fantasy goblins back in his previous life. After all, both were considered the lowest and weakest species in the world. So he decided to name their evolution like how goblins evolved to become hobgoblins. Yes, Boss Michael, replied Lolo with the gravitas of a cool uncle. There are other yellow Mankey tribes scattered around the parched lands. However, we do not know about each other's exact locations, Lolo replied. Michael thought it would be nice if he could evolve more Mankeys and have them live in his estate. He needed a lot more talented Hob Mankeys that could help with the jobs in this village. The mining group needed more workers. Kong had also been asking him for more talented engineers, and even needed help in expanding the farm. It was extremely fortunate that yellow Mankeys had the natural talent to become producers, so he could be sure that at least most of them would have something to do in the village. So Michael decided to dedicate some Hob Mankeys to try and find some of those tribes hidden in the desert. His intention was not to just get more workers, but to also help their current situation. He was worried that there were a lot of Mankeys experiencing the same hardships that Lolo and the others had to endure. There was plenty of space, food, and water here in his home. They didn't need to be suffering out there. He liked the village to be a lot more crowded. As the famous saying said, the more the merrier. Lolo, please find some able-bodied Hobmankeys who can make the trip through the parched lands to contact those remaining tribes, Michael said. He entrusted this job to Lolo because the old man had an A-class talent called Community Leader, which gave him the appropriate skills and knowledge to manage the current village. Lolo accurately tracked all the jobs and talents of all the Hobmankeys in the village, allowing him to easily assess which ones would be the best at which jobs. I have a couple of individuals who are perfectly capable of this job, Boss Michael. I will task them to find the other Mankey tribes. Trust that it will be done, Lolo said, bowing towards Michael. Michael then addressed his shadow on the ground. Fudge, you'll have your clones accompany them, right? The cute rogue slime with a Chinibu mentality popped out of his shadow and landed on the ground like a ninja. Yes, master. I have already spread my clones in the entire village. As long as they say the secret word Beetlejuice 3 times, then I will appear in their shadow, and they can communicate any emergency that befell them. Michael inwardly shook his head. It turned out that ChatJK 2 not only gave the little bugger anime tropes, but movie tropes as well. But since it didn't matter, Michael chose to ignore it. Okay, good. Fudge jumped up on Lolo's head and excitedly raised his head. I hope there's some talented recruits next time. No offense, but all the Mankeys in this village have boring talents. None of them want to join me in becoming part of my shadow army. Boss Fudge, if anyone in our village exhibits any desire to become a ninja, as you call it, then I will inform you immediately, Lolo said, as if trying to pacify the slime. Really? Good. I'm looking forward to it. Michael was glad that everything in the village was going well. According to Lolo, everyone was enjoying their current way of life. They could drink water with just a single twist of a lever. They had a roof over their heads that protected them from the heat of the sun, and they could eat food and fruits every day. This was everything they ever needed. Every single Hobmankey inwardly decided to do everything they could for Michael and this village. They worked harder than ever to contribute their talents to keeping the village well-fed and safe. The days passed, with every Mankey working on their own project in the village. There was one Mankey in particular whom Michael entrusted a very special job to. He was Kong. Right now, this particular Hobmankey ran through the village with an excited look on his face. He sidestepped away from its crops, jumped over the wooden carriage full of limestone, and ignored Lolo's warning of civility inside the village. Kong didn't care. He wanted to tell Michael the good news. He entered Michael's house and saluted at Fudge, who was practicing his ninja moves by the side of the kitchen. Then, he directly jumped into the second floor and burst through the master bedroom. Boss, it's working, Kong said with a voice faltering from excitement. Michael immediately got up from his bed and looked at Kong, with excitement growing on his face by the second. It's working, he asked Kong. It's working, boss, Kong replied. The two of them didn't need any explanation. They both ran out of the house and ran through the half-finished houses in the village. Kong had to go through the same obstacles as before, while Michael simply flew through the air and immediately headed towards a large square building in the distance. The structure was made out of concrete, with white smoke coming out of the exhaust vents at the roof. This was Michael and Kong's biggest project, the steam turbine. They worked together to construct a working generator that allowed them to harvest heat energy and turn it into usable electrical energy. They had to experiment and plan out the whole thing multiple times to make sure that everything had gone correctly. And yesterday, the last touches were finally constructed with the help of the other Hobmankey engineers. Early in the morning, Kong performed the last safety checks before finally informing Michael that the steam turbine was ready to turn on. They both rushed inside the control room and saw a couple of other engineer Hobmankeys pacing back and forth as they waited for Michael and Kong to arrive. Finally, it was time for them to see the fruits of their hard labor. Boss, you have the honors, Kong said as he presented the lever to Michael. Michael nodded and lifted the lever, which required quite a bit of strength to push. Thankfully, he was already quite strong, even as a 10-year-old child. As he pushed it to the on position, a satisfying click resounded throughout the control room, letting them know that the flint had successfully lit up the fire that would start to burn the fuel inside the compartments. Michael used his supreme skill, mana gathering, to see through the layers and layers of metal in the contraption. After igniting the fire, the water started to come to a boil, and upon reaching 100 degrees Celsius, or the water's boiling point, steam started to rise into one of the vents that directed everything into the turbine. Since there was quite a large amount of steam flowing into this relatively small vent, the speed and pressure from the steam were enough to propel the turbine into rotating at an extremely fast speed. This was where the magic happened. Slowly, the generator attached to the turbine started to emanate lightning mana, signaling the steam turbine's success in turning heat into electricity. But that wasn't enough. For them to know that the steam turbine was working properly, they all looked at a single light bulb placed in the middle of the control room. They all waited with bated breaths as the light bulb started flickering. And finally, it turned on and emitted a glow that lit up the entire room. We did it! The entire room erupted in celebrations of joy and relief. There was hugging, jumping, and shouting spread throughout all of them. "Boss, it's done. You were right." They couldn't believe that Michael's promise of being able to harness the power of electricity had come true. There was no magic required in this whole process, and only needed natural resources readily available in their surroundings. With this steam turbine, they could have light bulbs powering the whole village, even in the middle of the night. Michael was a little emotional as well. It only took 10 years, but he was finally able to have electricity in his life. He took a major leap in making life in this world a lot more comfortable than before. There were a lot of inventions he had in store that could only work with electricity. He would only be able to start working on them after today. "Thank you, guys. We all work hard for this," he said to Kong and the rest of the engineers. "But our job still isn't over." Then, he pointed at the window to the side of the room, showing the entirety of the village in view. "We need to start connecting each and every house with electricity. Kong, we have the electric lines ready, right?" The chief engineer nodded his head. "Yes, boss. I have already instructed other engineers to line up the houses with wires. We just need to connect them all to the power source." Michael nodded. Now was the time to show everyone the power of electricity. In the afternoon, Michael had Lolo gather everyone in the village to start the presentation of electricity. All the Hobmankeys gathered at the plaza in the middle of the village. They all waited patiently in their places as the sun soon set in the distance and night covered the entire skyline. Everyone was instructed to put out every candlelight in their houses, so the entire village was filled with darkness. "What's happening?" asked one of the Hobmankey children. "Shush, child. Our boss says that he has something amazing to show us," said his parents. But even still, there were a lot of Mankeys who became a little bit restless as they waited in the darkness. Just then, Michael's calming voice resounded through the plaza, making everyone excited. "Sorry for making you all wait, but it's worth it, I promise. Without further ado, I will now give you the results of what we have all been working on. Kong, turn on." With a single click, a blinding light overcame the Hobmankeys. The child Hobmankey winced and closed his eyes. He was a little bit afraid because he wasn't expecting such a bright light when the sun had already gone down a few hours ago. But then he started hearing gasps and awes of amazement. "Wow, I can't believe it. It's beautiful. Nicola, look at this." The child, upon hearing the emotional voices of his parents, slowly opened his eyes. And as his gaze adjusted to the light, he was met with the beautiful sight of their village lit up with stars everywhere. He gasped, unable to catch his breath upon seeing this amazing scenery. Michael instructed there to be miniature bulbs to be placed in wires and wrapped around the houses, just like Christmas lights back in his previous life. This made it seem like their village was graced with the presence of stars in the night sky. Everyone in the village quickly got hooked on using electricity in their daily lives. Now that they had this new power source, they no longer had to manually pump water up to the water tank for the entire village. Everything was now powered through an electric pump that supplied the plumbing system with water, automatically refilling it whenever the water had been used up. Water, which had been so scarce in their lives before, was now so abundant that there was a large fountain in the middle of the plaza that continuously entertained the Hobmankeys. Lolo watched with a warm gaze as the children played and splashed around in the fountain, drenching themselves in water. Because of Michael, children no longer had to feel the same hardships they experienced when they were kids. They had all the water they needed and so much more that they had the luxury of washing their bodies every day. He sighed and looked at the horizon of the parched lands. Guilt started to rise in his chest. Here he was enjoying life without any worries. Yet there were still a lot of yellow mankeys still suffering out there in the desert without even a drop of water to drink. He could only hope that they would soon find this paradise and be blessed with Michael's gift. Out in the middle of nowhere, with the horizon full of nothing but an endless desert, one single yellow mankey was trudging through the dry soil. His body was emaciated, with his skin flaking from dryness. It had been days since he traveled out of his village to find the mythical oasis, a place full of water and life. But he soon found out that this was nothing more than a dream. There were only bones out there from mankeys who ventured out into the desert with the same futile dream as him. He was about to give up and just return to his village. But just then he saw something in the distance. The heat of the sun turned everything blurry for the mankey, but he was sure that he witnessed other creatures walking in the desert. He walked closer until he finally came across a strange new species whose fur seemed to glow and shine under the sun. The mankey would have thought he came across his own species, but their straight posture and their human-like faces told him that they were different from himself. They were more powerful. Not only that, they seemed relaxed. Even when they wore strange clothes that covered their bodies, they didn't break a single sweat under the intense heat of the sun. They had a casual attitude, as if trudging through the harsh and dry desert was not a challenge, but an easy stroll in the morning. Compared to the mankey, these creatures were laughing and having fun. They weren't hanging on for dear life. Then, the mankey saw one of the creatures take out a single bottle from his pocket. Slosh. Even in the distance, the mankey could recognize that sound. It was water. The creature took a big gulp from the bottle and drank all the water he wanted to drink. The mankey couldn't help but gulp with a dry throat as he watched the creature quench his thirst. Then, something incredulous happened. The creature began to douse himself with the water, letting it drip out of his face and fall to the ground, completely wasting this life-saving resource. The mankey couldn't believe it. If his throat hadn't dried, he would have shouted at the creature for wasting water. Even if he already had his fill, the creature could have saved that water for his other comrades. Just as the mankey thought that, the other creatures took out their own bottles as well and began splashing themselves in water to try and beat the heat. Finally, the mankey built up the courage to approach these creatures. "Benevolent beings, please spare water for me," the mankey begged, his head almost buried in the ground. The hobmankeys all looked at him and saw the horrible state he was in. "I am willing to become slave for water, please." Before he could continue to beg and prostrate himself even more, he suddenly felt a cool sensation in his head. He looked up and saw a wooden bottle of water near his forehead. "You don't look well. Here, drink all the water you need," said the hobmankey. The mankey carefully took the bottle and took his first sip. It was truly water, and they gave it to him without even asking for anything in return. The mankey soon began filling himself with water. He didn't even let go of the last drops inside the bottle and drank it all before finally heaving a sigh of relief. "H.M." the mankey uttered, lying on the ground, completely filled. "Gracious beings, I thank you." The hobmankeys shrugged their shoulders. They seemed to have learned from Michael himself that this was a gesture that meant, "You're welcome. I am willing to give my life to serve benevolent beings," said the mankey. But the hobmankeys shook their heads. "There's no need for that. We have plenty of water to spare." Upon hearing this, the mankey was only led to one conclusion. They found the mythical oasis in the middle of the desert. If he could lead his village to this place, then they would be saved from death. "Please tell me," how you obtain this water. I need to save my village. Please tell me, where is Oasis?" The Mankey knew that this was a long shot. After all, if these creatures did find the oasis, they wouldn't want to share it with anybody else. They would hoard it for themselves. Even still, he had to try. In response, the Hobmankeys looked at each other. Even though they were only sent into the desert to find limestone, they were still instructed by Lolo to lead any lost Mankey into the village. "We don't know any oasis, but we do have a paradise. It's a place where water flows like rain, where food is abundant, and where stars come down into the ground at night. We can welcome you and your entire village. Do you want to see it?" An entire village of about 20 or so Mankeys traveled through the harsh desert for this supposed paradise. No sane creature would ever believe that this paradise was something real in the first place. They were told that in that place they could drink all the water they needed every day. They were told that if they lived there, they would never have to worry about going hungry at night. But perhaps the most unbelievable of all things was that anyone could obtain these privileges without having to pay for them at all. They just had to contribute their talents to the village. This group of Mankeys shouldn't have believed this story. It was too good to be true, but they were extremely desperate. The water they stored for the village had dried up, and it didn't seem like it would rain anytime soon. If they didn't take this chance, they would all soon die from dehydration. When they finally reached this paradise, they would quickly realize that they had made the right decision. They saw Hobmankeys working in construction, tending to crops, and doing all sorts of jobs in the very middle of the day when the sun was at its hottest. It was common knowledge for all Mankeys that they should only work early during the day or deep into the night so that the environment won't make them frequently thirsty. But these Hobmankeys didn't care at all. That was because they had water ready to drink at any time. They wanted with just a single twist of a lever from those strange metal contraptions installed on the walls of every home. "Ah, you must be the new Mankeys. Welcome." Lolo led the new batch of Mankeys inside the territory and showed them everything there was to see in the village. They were given all the water they wanted and all the food they wanted to eat. And most of all, he showed them the magic of electricity. Every house was lined with light bulbs that illuminated everything even when the sun couldn't reach them. It truly seemed as if the stars fell down and settled into this land. It didn't take long before the Mankeys all prostrated themselves to Lolo, begging and asking for him to allow their village to integrate into this paradise. They were willing to become slaves just for the chance to at least get some water for their village. They were even willing to just sleep outside in the open just to be in the vicinity of this paradise. Lolo had to quickly tell them that migrating to this village was free. If they wanted to live here and get all the benefits as well, then they could do so without any conditions. But of course, as Mankeys, they had to do something after receiving this gift. They had to repay this graciousness. If you want to contribute to this village, then you must visit the boss, the one who founded this paradise for everyone to live in comfort. He will awaken talents you can use to help this village grow," Lolo said with a smile. Michael welcomed the new Mankeys into the village by evolving them into Hobmankeys and unearthing the hidden talents within their species. As expected, each and every single one of them had talents in production, and with the help of Lolo, they were quickly given jobs that were appropriate to their awakened skills. Some went to Kong for engineering training. Some went to join the seamstresses to provide clothes for the entire village. And thankfully, they also had a lot of herders who were able to tend to livestock for food. Right now, the entire village finally reached the 3-digit number and was continuing to grow each and every week that passed. This wasn't the first batch of Mankeys that joined them in this village. All the scouting done by the Hobmankeys had allowed more tribes to migrate here and live a better life. This meant that the construction of houses became an ever-growing project that continued to make Kong busy every day. It helped that there was a lot more awakened engineer Hobmankeys, but the projects were still a lot for them to take in. And since there were a lot more inhabitants in the village, the consumption of electricity had also shot up. Thankfully, the Mankeys continued to search the desert for oil wells that they could gather for fuel in the steam turbine. Michael had to create about 5 more automobiles just to help ease the burden of mining and gathering resources in the desert. 2 automobiles were used to gather oil, 2 were used to gather limestone, and 2 were used to search for more tribes and transport them into the village. Because of this, the production of concrete became much easier. Almost the entire village now had concrete flooring, except of course the new expanding houses under construction for the newly evolved hobmankeys. Michael also had Kong working on a concrete factory, which was on its way to becoming finished as well. He was getting nearer to the day that he could finally sell concrete as a Reborn product. Of course, he still had to think up a way to market this strange new building material, but that was a problem for another day. Michael planned to take a rest after evolving this last mankey. But then Michael noticed his ability. It wasn't an S-class talent or anything, but the skill he gained from the evolution was something that gave Michael an extremely good idea. He immediately awakened the mankey's talent and asked him for a favor. "I want you to use your skill and find that material," he said to the new hobmankey. "As you wish," he replied. With the help of Lolo, the new hobmankey immediately went to work and was accompanied by several other mankeys in search of this precious material in the desert. A day later, the hobmankey returned to Michael's estate and showed him a strange rock-like crystal with a yellowish color. Michael smiled as he took the crystalline rock in his hands. Even though it smelled like rotten eggs, he was the only one who knew the true value of this element. This was sulfur, an incredibly important material for his next project. "You know what I'm thinking, right, ChatJK 2? I have downloaded the formula into your brain," replied his personal AI assistant. With this, he would be able to create something incredibly amazing. It was the perfect gift for his mother's upcoming birthday. Lilia sighed as she looked out the window of the Vanderbilt estate. It had already been a few months since Michael left their home, but she had already been feeling quite lonely without her son since day one. Feeling bored, she got up out of her bed and started to wander around their mansion. Everything reminded her of him. She walked to the kitchen house and saw the maids washing the dishes using the faucets Michael made. She went outside to see Sebastian and the other butlers playing chess during their break times. There was a clear absence within their group, with the middle chair remaining vacant for Michael. Then, she went to the backyard to look at the training yard. She used to have early morning magic sessions with Michael here every day, and even though she had nothing left to teach him, he still patiently absorbed her teachings without feeling bored. She walked to the hot springs, and the hot steam coming out of the roof reminded her of the daily baths with Michael. He would always act shy about entering the women's section, but would always end up caving to her whims and bathing with her. She didn't have any mood to take a bath right now, so she returned to their bedroom and lay down on her bed. Perhaps the thing that she missed the most about Michael was all his strange stories and ideas that came to him in his dreams. Every night, before they went to sleep, Michael would visit the master bedroom and tell them about a parallel world he dreamed of in his sleep. In that world, humans lived without any sort of magic in their bodies and were entirely reliant on technology. And despite the simpleness of life without magic, he would always describe that parallel world as something even more amazing than magic. Creativity reigned supreme rather than strength. Over there, people worshipped and idolized men and women who could sing or dance much better than others. He even said that if she had been born there, she would have been quite popular as an actress or an idol in the entire world. He told them all about the special occasions in that world, including a day for lovers, a day for independence, a day for the birth of some kind of god, and a day for the advent of a new year. During those occasions, everyone could see glowing flowers in the skies. This captured Lilia's imagination. She even wished she could peek through Michael's mind just so that she could see the magnificence of those glowing flowers that exploded out into the skyline. Michael's stories made her wonder what she would have been like in that parallel world. Would she have been able to witness those flowers blossom on her birthday? She chuckled at herself for thinking about such foolish things. Michael was so good at storytelling that it made her want to see something that was only present in fantasy stories. "Hi, Miss Michael. I hope he's here tomorrow." Her words were just something she uttered to herself. "But, of course, I'll be here, Mom. It's your birthday." Michael said as he suddenly appeared behind her. Lilia was so surprised that she ended up jumping out of her bed. Her eyes widened as she saw Michael present in the flesh. She slowly approached him, with her hands stretched out to touch his face. And as she made contact with his cheeks, she felt his warmth in her hands. This was real. This wasn't a hallucination. Michael was back in the mansion. She jumped towards him, embracing him with all the pent-up energy she had from his months-long absence. Mom? Having trouble breathing here, but she ignored him and kept him in her embrace. Finally, after she filled her yearning for her son, she let go of him and grabbed his shoulders. I knew you wouldn't forget my birthday, she said ecstatically. Of course, Mom. I wouldn't miss it, he replied, scratching his nose with a little bit of a blush. How did you get here? She asked. Did you travel for days in your automobile? Michael cleared his throat. Before you ask me that, Mom, I would like to show you something first. It's my birthday gift to you. He led her out onto the balcony of the master bedroom, which overlooked the entire estate and all the forestry around it. The sun had already set a few hours ago, and there was only darkness in the distant skies. Strangely enough, the entire estate was enveloped in darkness as well. The lampposts that were supposed to be lit with fire around the estate were completely snuffed out. Did Beretta forget to light up the oil lamps? Lilia asked herself, looking down at the garden. No, Mom. I asked her to extinguish all the lights for tonight. I want to show you something, Michael explained. What are you planning? She asked, a little bit suspicious. Michael pointed at the sky and said, Keep your eyes there, Mom. She did as he said and heard him whisper a countdown for himself. 3, 2, 1. TSHHH. Suddenly, a single line of fire emerged from the darkness of the forest and soared up into the skies. And as it reached the zenith, the fire suddenly exploded into a beautiful amalgamation of reddish colors, blossoming into a full flower in the skies. Lilia gasped. She couldn't believe her eyes. Before long, a few more lines of fire shot out from the forest and exploded into the sky, creating a bouquet of colorful flowers for Lilia to enjoy. After discovering sulfur in the parched lands, Michael was able to create the infamous gunpowder. With just a couple more ingredients, he was able to create fireworks. His gift to Lilia made her heart feel warm inside, tears welling up in her eyes. This looked even better than in her imagination. She couldn't believe that Michael was able to show her something she thought she would never be able to see. She kissed Michael on the forehead and smiled. Thank you, son. I love it, she said, wiping the tears away from her eyes. And so, the mother and son enjoyed the fireworks show for the rest of the night with nothing but silence. Wait a minute, Michael, Lilia said. You never told me how you got here. Michael laughed awkwardly as he scratched his head. I have my own clone shadow attached to Michael 2 all this time as well. This allowed me to take its place and arrive here in an instant. Huh. Isn't that cool, Mom? Lilia went silent. Mom, so you're telling me that you could have always been here this entire time? Lilia uttered with a low voice, with her blonde hair masking her expression. Michael started backing away. He needed an excuse. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. That wasn't a viable response. The chaos in the mansion was masked by the sounds of fireworks blowing off in the skies. As a punishment, he was forced to visit them at least 3 times a week to continue his stories about the parallel world from his dreams. A week after visiting the Vanderbilt estate for his mother's birthday, Michael wanted to see the current state of the Reborn company in Kingsbridge. As Castell wrote company reports in her office, the candle suddenly flickered and her shadow morphed into something completely different. Castell, I'm coming to visit. Michael's voice sounded out through her office, notifying her of his presence. She immediately fixed her posture and turned around to welcome the young master. She bowed down to the corner of the room, where Michael magically appeared out of nowhere. It has been a while, young master, Castell said. Sorry, I got busy with stuff in the parched lands. I'll try to visit Kingsbridge more often now that I've got more help. Before he left, Michael left everyone he knew a clone of himself in their shadows. This was a superior version of Fudge's skills, which allowed Michael to transfer his true body to any of his clones no matter the distance between them. This made traveling back and forth to Kingsbridge and the parched lands extremely easy. "How is our company doing?" Michael asked as he took a peek at the window, showing the office floor of the company. There had been a huge influx of workers in the building from the last time he visited this place. It looked like Castell had to hire a lot more people to manage the growing business of Reborn. "The company's doing extremely well, young master. The entirety of Kingsbridge has now been lined with our plumbing system, allowing them easy access to water. The profits we have garnered from the installation alone have netted us more than 10 million gold coins. We have also implemented a subscription-based water filtration system that you envisioned. Every month, we gain hundreds of thousands of gold coins from the citizens wanting to drink water straight from the tap." Michael nodded to himself. Slowly, Kingsbridge was reaching closer and closer to the quality of living in his previous life. Although they had to pay a water bill every month, it was worth it because they were kept safe from deadly diseases and plagues. "How about the sewer system?" Michael asked. "Everything in that front is doing as we expected, young master. The construction was finished without a hitch." Castell showed Michael the report papers regarding the whole project. He inspected everything with ChatJK2 and saw that everything had gone as well as they planned. With the help of Cerberus and the Magic Tower, the quality of work was assured from the very start. Because of our efforts, the rate of diseases in the city had gone down substantially, Castell said with vigor. Fudge briefly popped out of Michael's shadow. "My clones inspect. No kind of plague spreading in the city, master." Thanks to the goddess's timely warning, they were able to completely stop the decimation of humans in the city. Not only that, but the surrounding territories around Kingsbridge have also contacted us with requests to implement the same sewer and plumbing system in their area. Castell said, pointing to the mountain of letters in her desk from the overlords and governors of those territories. "I must admit, young master, this subscription-based system is nothing short of genius. If we start to implement the plumbing system in more and more homes, the monthly fees we earn will continue to grow each year. The huge influx of money will allow us to fully expand into the King's region and hopefully break into the Queen's region." The country they were in was divided into different regions. Kingsbridge City and Michael's home estate were both located in the King's region. Below the King's region was only the parched lands. On its left and right were surrounded by oceans, but above it was the region called Queen's region. If they wanted to continue growing the Reborn company into a worldwide business, then they needed to first conquer the entire country. And to do that, they needed to expand into the Queen's region to have access to the rest of the country. "How is it?" Michael asked. "Have we had any success in reaching the Queen's region?" He asked this because the Queen's region was hard to get into, solely because of the mountain ranges that separated the two regions. Peddlers needed to trek through dangerous valleys and landslide-prone areas just to reach the Queen's region. "We've had success in spreading our products there," replied Castell. "The only problem is the speed of our expansion. Because of the hard terrain, we can only transport soap and matchsticks in that area for now. After all, we produce all the products here at Kingsbridge and have them transported all the way there. Faucets and pipes are hard to transport properly, so we can't implement the plumbing system there yet. It would be a lot easier once we construct the main branch in the Queen's region, which would be helped by all the money we gain from our projects." Michael thought hard about the problem plaguing Castell. He instructed ChatJK2 to give him a mental image of the country's map to give him a better view of the situation. From the looks of it, the only thing preventing their expansion was the hard landscape of the mountain regions. Then his eyes went over to the empty space beside the mountains, devoid of any treacherous terrain. "Look at this," he said to Castell, projecting the country map into the air. "Why can't we just go through this section beside the mountains?" Castell inspected the map and shook her head. "It's not possible, young master. That is inhabited by an infamous dwarven kingdom. They are not friendly to humans and have always rejected any attempt from humans trying to enter their territory." Michael, hearing this, knew that they couldn't force the dwarven kingdom to open their gates for the Reborn company. They would just have to find another way for now. "Oh, Castell, I forgot. The reason why I visited you this time is because I have another product I want you to sell. It's called concrete. Michael went back to the parched lands after talking to Castell about the next plans for the Reborn company. After telling her about the uses of concrete, she quickly caught on and knew that it was going to be a big hit. However, Castell decided that before they started to sell concrete, they should make sure that there would be a steady stream of it readily available in stock. She already learned her lesson after things got too hectic in their office after they announced the plumbing system a few months back. She underestimated just how much the demand would be for the faucets and showers in Kingsbridge, leading the Reborn offices to become extremely hectic as they tried their hardest to keep up with the demand. They had to spend a lot more money than they expected just to hire more workers in the meantime. Castell predicted that the demand for concrete would be the same, if not larger, than the plumbing system. After all, with concrete, it was possible to construct a 10-foot tall wall around Kingsbridge in a matter of days. That short time frame was extremely absurd. Coupled with its strength, durability, and cheapness compared to other materials, everyone would rather use concrete to construct their buildings. So, Michael and Castell both decided to first create a proper road from the parched lands to the Vanderbilt estate to easily transport the concrete that Michael's village was going to create. With a highway directly connecting the two places, Castell could easily receive enough shipments of concrete within a week of its creation. Of course, this meant that Michael had to customize a large truck automobile for this shipment. He already planned to ask for Kong's help in creating this new vehicle, which would speed up the creation process for the new car. Another benefit of creating a highway road was that the village could easily procure materials they needed from Castell. There were a lot of things that Michael and the village needed in the parched lands that they couldn't acquire naturally. There were things such as spices for food, seeds for the farm, and other exotic materials that they could only get using Reborn's large purchasing power in the human realm. So, he had Castell coordinate with Lolo for the exchange of goods for the village. They agreed that every other week, a group of Mankeys would travel to the Vanderbilt estate to pick up the products sent by Castell. This would greatly help the expansion of the village, especially with the large influx of newly evolved Hobmankeys. So after his conversation with Castell, Michael had taken care of everything he could take care of for now. Somewhere out there, between the valleys of the mountain ranges separating the King's region and the Queen's region, the ground began trembling with furious intensity. Trees were uprooted from the ground. Birds and animals fled from their habitats in search of more stable ground. Even the established route of peddlers became nothing more than a collection of loose ground. The intensity of this earthquake broke off large chunks out of the mountains, which began to roll down its cliffs towards the land below. But even as the hours passed, the intensity only became even greater than before, unshackling the stable mountains from their position. A landslide of unprecedented proportions overcame a large portion of the boundary between the King's region and the Queen's region, rendering it unpassable for the time being. However, that was not all that was affected. The Dwarven Kingdom, known for their mastery in metallurgy, was left unable to defend against the onslaught of the tsunami-like landslide that came unexpectedly. It didn't help that all of this unfolded deep into the night, where most dwarves were either asleep or drowning themselves in ale. But of course, due to their sturdy construction practices, their buildings were able to survive the first wave of the landslide, giving them time to evacuate from the affected areas. The dwarves could only watch helplessly as their homes and forges became mere rubble from the rush of the landslide. Even though it was made up of nothing but muddy soil and rock from mountains, the speed at which they came to their territory was enough to destroy most of their dwarven structures in a matter of minutes. Meanwhile, the Dwarven King was awakened from his deep sleep and informed of the current situation. He quickly assembled his greatest engineers and blacksmiths to try and assess the damage done to his kingdom. After a long meeting, the general consensus within the dwarves was that it would take at least a month just to rebuild part of their wall taken down by the landslide. It would take even more months for them to start reconstructing the homes and forges of the unfortunate dwarves caught up in this mess. Even though no dwarf was harmed by this disaster, the Dwarven King couldn't help but stroke his long braided beard out of worry. After all, With the wall destroyed and thousands upon thousands of dwarves out of homes, their kingdom was now vulnerable to the outer world. This was a problem that they couldn't solve even with their current advancements in their craftsmanship. So, the Dwarven King stayed on his throne, solemnly in deep thought as he tried to think of a solution to his current problem. After a few days, news quickly spread to the territories next to the Dwarven Kingdom. Particularly, this reached the ears of the greatest businessman in the current world, Ise Vanderbilt. The old man smiled as his advisors informed him of the situation. "Send a delegate to the Dwarven King," he said decisively. "Tell him we're ready to provide him with all the funds, materials, and manpower to help him rebuild his kingdom." Ise immediately knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance for him to finally break through that stubborn old Dwarven king. Even in his successful history as the Vanderbilt Lion, the greatest businessman in the world, Ise had always failed to spread his business to the Dwarven Kingdom. They rejected any human that tried to bring their company into his realm. But now he saw a chance. If he could gain the favor of the Dwarven King, Ise could finally get the chance to exchange business and receive exclusive products from the dwarves. Although unlikely, he still had to take a chance. Success meant he would be written down in history as the first man to ever do so. Right? Discover Stories with Empire. Michael was lying on his bed in the parched lands when all of a sudden he felt a disturbance in the air. He quickly sat up and used his supreme skill, mana gathering, allowing him to gaze past reality and peer through the invisible elemental mana present in his vicinity. From what he could see, there was no immediate danger inside the village or even in the parched lands. The distress seemed to have come from a faraway land, somewhere away from the king's region. He immediately checked in on his family with his clones and was relieved to find out that they were fine, with his mother and father sleeping deeply into the night. Chat JK2, can you tell me what happened? According to the agitation of earth mana in the surroundings, there is a large displacement in the tectonic plates of the very ground itself, leading to the shifting of the land. After some calculations, I have deduced the problem to have occurred near the border between the King's and Queen's region, directly on the mountain ranges separating the two. With such a large change in landscape, Michael was sure that there could have been a lot of innocent people caught up unprepared from this natural disaster. When he looked at the country map in his mind, he saw that there were a couple of dwarven villages directly bordering the mountain ranges that could have been affected the most by the earthquake. He immediately changed places with his clone in Castell Shadow, transporting his real body to Reborn's main office in Kingsbridge City. "Sorry to bother you so late this night," Michael said as he appeared behind Castell, who seemed to have been burning the midnight oil. "It's no worries, young master. I was just finishing up some paperwork for our eventual expansion to the Queen's region," she said, with clear-eyed bags above her cheeks. "Sorry to say this, but I think you're going to have to postpone that for a little bit. Something has happened in the mountains." Michael explained everything ChatJK2 told him to Castell. Being the sharp business manager that she was, Castell immediately knew that a lot of businesses would get disturbed by this disaster. And most unfortunate of all was the Dwarven Kingdom, which seemed to have taken the full brunt of the earthquake's aftermath. "Can you send some people to see if there are any families affected by this? I want to help them," Michael said with worry on his face. Castell immediately nodded her head. "I will send for some of our employees to scout the area as soon as possible. I will send word to you when we have more information." Michael knew that with such a large disaster, time was of the essence. This couldn't wait till tomorrow morning. He closed his eyes and sensed all of his clones hiding in the shadows of other people. "Chat JK2, can you find me a clone nearest to the Queen's region?" "Certainly. There's one single reborn peddler currently trying to bypass the landslide region." "I'll be going now, Castell. I have to see this for myself," he said as his body suddenly turned into pure darkness that soon merged back into Castell's shadow. Michael emerged out of the reborn peddler's shadow, who continued to walk away from the landslide, none the wiser that Michael had just magically appeared behind him. The soles of his feet burst out with air mana as he started to float in the air, allowing him to traverse the landslide with ease. He looked down and saw what seemed to be a spilled muddy soup made out of unrooted trees and large boulders, leading towards the dwarven kingdom in the distance. His eyes shone with a golden light as he activated his supreme skill, trying to sense the presence of light mana in the area. Thankfully, the absence of dark mana told him that there weren't any casualties from this disaster. He continued to float forward, looking down and trying to sense for any survivors looking for help. After a few minutes, he came across what looked to be the remnants of a small village. Roofs of stone houses were peeking out of the muddy landslide. Chimneys were sticking out of the wreckage, and there was even a metal statue of the dwarven king floating among the debris of metal and stone that once made up this village. After further inspection, he saw a large collection of light mana hiding inside one of the houses that stood tall even with the onslaught of the landslide. Michael slowly floated down and inspected the dwarven architecture. They seemed unable to escape the house because of all the debris and scrap blocking the entrance. With a single wave of his hand, Michael created a giant magical hand made out of pure mana called Mage Hand, which easily shoveled away all the dirt and mud obstructing the door. Once everything was gone, he stepped into the entryway and knocked on the door. Slowly, the wooden door creaked open, showing the presence of a burly dwarf with a brown braided beard. The dwarf adjusted his eyes as he looked at Michael. A human? I would have never expected a human to save us from our predicament. Upon saying those words, more and more dwarves peeked out of the door and gazed at Michael, the human that freed them from being buried alive. It wasn't that they were ungrateful, but they all expected a fellow dwarf to be the one to save them. But it seemed that this human valued their life more than other fellow dwarves. Otherwise, they would have been saved hours ago. Thank you, human. What is your name? The first dwarf offered his hand to Michael. Call me Michael, he said, shaking the dwarf's hand. My name is Thrain Ironhand. I and my fellow villagers must apologize for our behavior upon meeting you. We mean not to be rude, but as you can see, we are in a state of emergency. We have lost everything we have built up in all our lives. We have lost our homes, leaving us with no bed to sleep on. Michael didn't take their weird stares for rudeness. After all, they had just experienced something traumatic. Their entire village was laid to waste in a matter of seconds, and if they were any less alert, they could have lost their lives as well. We have nothing to offer, but please come inside, Thrain said, welcoming him to their safe haven. Michael entered the nearly wrecked house of the dwarves and saw an entire village of them crammed into this very small space. If it weren't for their small stature, they wouldn't have been able to fit into such a cramped place. After all, their numbers were nearing 3 digits. As dwarves, we are indebted to repay twofold what you have done for us. However, we are currently unable to fulfill that, Thrain said, looking apologetic. But Michael shook his head. There's no need to worry about that for now. It looks like you all have it rough. Everyone was taking turns to nibble on a single piece of bread. This was their only sustenance. Our pride wouldn't have accepted that, but you are completely right. Our village is completely destroyed, and we don't have anywhere else to go, Thrain said, sitting on the chair opposite Michael. Why not? Asked Michael. Aren't you a part of the dwarven kingdom? Wouldn't they help you reconstruct the village? Thrain and the others let out a groan. Unfortunately, their help would only come months and months later. We do not doubt that the dwarven king is currently allocating all of his resources into rebuilding the walls before trying to rebuild villages in the outskirts of the kingdom. We do not blame him. His duty as king demands him to prioritize the walls over anything else. However, this leaves us with nowhere else to go. The dwarves looked extremely downtrodden as they thought of what the future would hold for them. They would be forced to relocate to a place that wasn't ravaged by the landslide and was bountiful with resources. However, finding this place would be an extremely hard task. After all, this country was primarily a realm for humans. Everything was already taken or conquered by them, leaving nothing for them to live in even in the king's region. And they couldn't simply try to live with the humans. As demi-humans, dwarves were not normal in their society. This was especially true because it was their race who decided to shut themselves off from humans in the first place. So, Thrain and the rest of the dwarves would either have to search the ends of the continent not conquered by humans or take their chances overseas. We appreciate your help, Michael. But if we want to take our journey to the oceans, then we should better start now. If fate so decides it, then I hope we will meet again under better circumstances so that we can repay you for saving our lives. Thrain stood up from his chair and offered his hand to Michael. The rest of the dwarves also expressed their thanks to Michael before they started packing their things for their eventual journey away from the Dwarven Kingdom. But before they even finished packing, Michael faced them all and asked them one simple thing. If you're trying to find a place to stay, then why not stay in our village? Thrain and the rest of the dwarves looked at Michael, but instead of treating him seriously, they thought that it was just a meaningless gesture by a 10-year-old child. We appreciate it, Michael, but it isn't that simple. We cannot live in any human society because our customs and way of living are completely different from yours. We are also creatures of the metal, meaning that we will eventually want to recreate our own forges for smithing. So, unless your house is located somewhere far away from human society, then we will politely decline. Michael smiled. Actually, he began to tell them all about his village in the parched lands and how they had all the water, food, and space they needed to grow a large community of yellow mankeys. Thrain gave Michael a strange look. After all, his words were completely too good to be true. First of all, he said that yellow mankeys populated their community, where each of them had their own jobs and duty for the village. However, from what they knew, yellow mankeys were creatures of simple mind. And second, he said that the village was located in the parched lands. As the name suggested, it was a place that was devoid of water. But Michael said that their village had an abundance of both water and food for everyone to sustain themselves. It wasn't that they didn't trust Michael, but those words were truly too good to be true. It was exactly what they needed, as if the heavens simply rained down gold for them to take freely. Why not just take a visit to our village first? You're all going to journey out into the ocean anyway, right? You can take a slight detour and see the village for yourselves, Michael said, with the rest of the dwarves starting to believe his words. You have no reason to lie, Thrain pondered to himself. And it is as you said, we're going in that direction anyway. Continue your adventure with Empire. He and the rest of the adult dwarves all convened together to talk about their decision. After a few minutes, they all decided to do as Michael said. After all, they wouldn't lose anything if they did. Then, we will take you up on your offer, Thrain replied. Good. I already called in for help, and they would soon arrive in this location, Michael said, looking out into the distant Kingsbridge city. Michael, you have a carriage we can borrow? Thrain asked expectantly. This elicited a bright expression on the dwarves. After all, with a carriage, they wouldn't have to waste their energy walking great distances. I hope you brought quite a strong horse. We dwarves are quite hefty, haha, Thrain joked. Michael awkwardly scratched his head and spoke. Well, it has horsepower, that's for sure. Master, we come to pick you up. Out from the window of Michael's automobile, a certain edgy slime peeked out and waved at Michael with an overly big smile. Behind Fudge's car were 5 other cars, each manned by a skilled hobmankey driver capable of transporting goods from a large distance. After an hour, help had finally arrived. Each of the automobiles had a large wooden bed that had its own wheels attached to the back of the car. This cargo space was made specifically to carry large amounts of materials from Kingsbridge to the parched lands. Luckily enough, today was supposed to be the day that Castell would send supplies to the village, so the 6 cars were already parked near Kingsbridge. This meant that they could reach the outskirts of the Dwarven Kingdom within a few hours. These are my automobiles. Hop on. We can reach the parched lands within just a few days. Despite Michael's words, the dwarves refused to move. They looked at the intricate and complex metal parts of the automobile and couldn't help but gasp at how advanced its construction was compared to anything they had ever seen. Not only that, Michael's carriages seemed to move with great speed despite having no horses powering its wheels. How is it moving? It's magic, right? How else could it move without a horse? But there's not even an ounce of magic in that metal contraption. They couldn't understand it. Even as proud blacksmiths, They felt like they were looking at something completely alien and out of this world whenever they stared at the automobiles. It was simply beyond anything that even the best blacksmiths and craftsmen could make in the Dwarven kingdom. Thrain built up the courage to slowly approach the automobile. Vroom! Upon hearing the loud thrum of the engine, he couldn't help but jump back in surprise. It was alive. It was alive, not in the sense that it was a living being like dwarves, humans, or even monsters. No, from what he could see, it seemed as if the metal construct itself was alive, without being alive. Michael, what is this beast of yours? How is it possible that something lifeless is able to breathe like it was filled with life? Thrain uttered with a low voice. He carefully stroked his hand against the cold metal of the vehicle and felt it breathe. To answer his question, Michael opened the hood and showed him and all the curious dwarves the inner workings of his automobile. This part is called an engine. It uses the power of combustion. He briefly explained to them about the principles of an internal combustion engine. This is called the axle, and it allows the engine to power the wheels and make it move. It also allows the wheels to move and steer in a different direction. And as Michael continued to explain everything about the car, the dwarves couldn't help but feel as if they were hearing something completely out of their depths. Michael mentioned principles and theories with such casualness that other people might have thought that everything he said was common knowledge. Yet, even a single idea of his was enough to advance the current understanding of mechanics in the Dwarven Kingdom. This blows my mind. I feel like a baby. This completely changes my perspective on everything metallurgy. No offense, but I am simply baffled at the fact that a human child was able to create such a magnificent piece of machinery. The hobmankeys on the front seat of the cars couldn't help but chuckle to themselves. Finally, someone else understood their surprise whenever their boss created something completely out of this world. Foo, you guys haven't seen anything yet, bragged Fudge. I can't wait to see your faces when you see the light bulbs in our village. Light bulbs, uttered the dwarves in confusion. All right, enough of that, Fudge. We should get going, Michael said as he started to lead the dwarves into the car. They started their journey down south towards the parched lands. The duration of their journey would be the same, if not shorter, than the travel between Kingsbridge and the parched lands. On the way, the dwarves couldn't help but laud Michael for his invention of the automobile. It was even faster and more stable than the most expensive of carriages, making this to be the best form of transportation in the world. Enjoy new tales from Empire. The days passed, and they finally reached the desert landscape of the parched lands. And immediately, the dwarves caught sight of the supposed village on the horizon. It was unlike anything they had ever assumed. They thought that a village in the parched lands would be made out of mud and clay, but somehow this village would look indistinguishable from most human settlements. Welcome home, boss. Lolo was there to greet the new inhabitants of the village, showing their hospitality by giving the dwarves bottles of water and fruits to soothe the long journey they experienced. The dwarves could only stare and gape in wonder as they looked at Michael's village. Hobmankeys were walking on flat, solid footing, devoid of any mud or dust that was so prevalent in the parched lands. Many of them were walking on well-designed streets that were divided into organized blocks. There were also other hobmankeys strolling through the streets using a strange and thin metal contraption with only 2 wheels. This looked like an advanced civilization that should not exist in the vastness of this desert. Yet it did. There were farms on the outskirts of the territory, with hobmankeys carefully tending to their crops. There were hobmankeys busy with construction work using a strange material. And most surprising of all were the children happily playing on the streets, splashing themselves with water without a care in the world. Brothers, I can't believe a place like this exists. I thought our Dwarven kingdom had reached the peak of civilization. I thought wrong. Is this really going to be our new place? Michael looked at the numerous dwarves in front of him and spread his arms. Welcome to our village. Make yourselves at home.